They called her worthless, broken, a mistake unfit to breathe the same air as wolves with rank and power. The Alpha King himself rejected her in front of the entire kingdom, tearing apart the sacred mate bond like it was nothing more than rotting cloth. They laughed as she fell. They cheered as she was cast into exile. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that the girl they threw away wasn't broken at all. She was something far more dangerous, something ancient, something that should have stayed buried. And when she finally stopped hiding, the kingdom would learn what it truly meant to fear. Stay with me until the end of this story. You won't believe what happens when the wolfless outcast returns. Drop a like, comment which city you're watching from, and let's begin. The throne room stank of wet fur and old blood. Kaela Thorn stood in the center of it all, her bare feet cold against the stone floor, her wrists bound with iron chains that burned against her skin. The metal wasn't silver, thank the stars for that, but it was heavy enough to remind her she wasn't here by choice. The weight pulled at her shoulders, made her arms ache, but she refused to let it show. She was here because the Alpha King demanded it. Around her the court had gathered like vultures circling a carcass. Wolves in human skin, their eyes glowing faintly in the torchlight, their lips curled back just enough to show teeth. They weren't snarling yet. But they would be. They always did. The Northern Reach wasn't known for its mercy. It was a frontier kingdom, carved out of wilderness and watered with blood. 300 years ago, the first wolves had claimed this land from the mountain clans, fighting tooth and nail for every inch of territory. The kingdom had been built on violence, maintained through violence, and would probably end in violence. Strength was the only currency that mattered here. Power, dominance, the ability to rip out throats and smile while doing it. And Kaela had none of those things. Or so they thought. She kept her chin up, her gaze fixed on the throne at the far end of the hall. The room was massive, 50 feet high at least, with stone pillars carved to look like ancient trees, their branches spreading across the vaulted ceiling. Torches burned in iron sconces along the walls, casting dancing shadows that made the assembled wolves look even more monstrous than they already were. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The whispers had already started. She could hear them slithering through the crowd like snakes through grass. Can you believe she actually claimed it? Pathetic. The king wouldn't touch her with a 10-foot pole. I heard she can't even shift, completely wolfless. Should have been cold years ago. My father always said the weak ones bring down the whole pack. Look at her. Scrawny little thing, probably never hunted a day in her life. Kaela's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Words were wasted on people like this. They'd already made up their minds about who she was, what she was worth. Nothing she said would change that. She'd learned that lesson early, back when she was 6 years old and the other children had held her down and tried to force her to shift. She still had scars from that day. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved from black stone and the bones of enemies long dead, was Darien Voss, the Alpha King. Newly crowned, barely a month into his reign, and already drunk on the power of it. He was beautiful in the way predators often were. Sharp jawline, dark hair that fell just past his shoulders, eyes the color of molten gold. The kind of face that made people forget he was capable of tearing them apart with his bare hands. Broad shoulders, arms corded with muscle, the kind of build that came from years of fighting, hunting, surviving. He wore the traditional black leather of the Northern Reach wolves, with silver clasps at his shoulders bearing the royal crest, a wolf's head circled by thorns. Kaela had felt the mate bond snap into place the moment she'd first laid eyes on him 3 weeks ago. She'd been in the market square buying bread with the few coins she'd managed to scrape together when he'd ridden past with his honor guard. Their eyes had met for just a second, maybe less, but it had been enough. The bond had hit her like lightning. A pull so strong it had nearly knocked her to her knees. The feeling of right, of mine, of home that every wolf dreamed of finding. Her wolf, or whatever lived inside her that wasn't quite a wolf, had recognized him instantly, had called out to him with a desperation that terrified her. And for just a moment, she'd seen his eyes widen, seen him pull his horse to a stop, seen him turn to look at her again, really look at her, like he was seeing something he couldn't quite believe. Then Marcus Crane, his beta, had said something, and Darien had ridden on. But Kaela had known. known with absolute certainty that he'd felt it too. She'd been stupid enough to think that maybe it meant something, that maybe she wasn't as broken as everyone said, that maybe, just maybe, fate had decided she deserved something good for once in her miserable life. She'd gone to the castle the next day, had waited outside the gates for hours until a guard finally agreed to take a message to the king, had written it herself in careful, halting letters. I felt the bond. I know you did too. Please. The summons had come 2 days later. But Darien wasn't looking at her like she was his mate now. He was looking at her like she was a stain on his new throne. A problem that needed solving. An inconvenience that had to be dealt with before he could move on to more important matters. To his right stood Marcus Crane, the Beta and Darien's oldest friend. Tall, scarred, with eyes like flint, and a mouth that seemed permanently set in a sneer. He'd been the one to drag Kaela from her hovel at dawn, the one to chain her wrists and march her through the streets while the pack jeered and spat. She'd known Marcus since childhood. He was 10 years older than her, and he'd never missed an opportunity to remind her that she didn't belong. To Darien's left was Vera Blackwood, the kingdom's head counselor and a wolf who'd survived 4 different alpha kings through sheer cunning and ruthlessness. She was ancient by pack standards, maybe 60, maybe older, with silver hair braided down her back and a face that looked like it had been carved from stone. Vera had been the one to argue, loudly and publicly, that Kaela should be executed rather than allowed to address the court. Both of them were staring at Kaela like she was an insect they were debating whether to crush. Behind the throne, standing in the shadows, was Lissa Voss, Darien's younger sister. She was 18, beautiful in a cold, cruel way, with the same golden eyes as her brother, but none of his restraint. Lissa had always hated Kaela, though Kaela had never understood why. They'd barely spoken 3 words to each other in their entire lives, but the look on Lissa's face now was pure satisfaction. Kaela Thorn, Darien said, his voice carrying across the hall with the kind of authority that made even the strongest wolves lower their eyes. Step forward. She didn't move. Not because she was trying to be defiant, but because her legs wouldn't cooperate. Every instinct she had was screaming at her to run, to get away, to escape before this got worse. But there was nowhere to go. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. Someone laughed, short and sharp, like the bark of a hyena. Darien's expression didn't change. I said step forward. The guards flanking her, 2 massive wolves named Garrett and Finn, both of whom had bullied her since childhood, grabbed her by the arms and shoved her toward the throne. She stumbled but didn't fall. The chains rattled as she straightened, meeting Darien's gaze head on. For just a second, so brief she almost thought she imagined it, something flickered in his eyes. Something that looked almost like regret. Or maybe pain. Then it was gone, replaced by that cold, blank mask. You were brought before this court, Darien continued, his tone flat and clinical, because of a claim you made. A claim that you are my fated mate. I didn't claim anything, Kaela said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The bond is there. You felt it too. Another laugh from the crowd, louder this time. Someone in the back shouted, "Delusional!" and it was met with cheers and howls of agreement. Darien leaned back in his throne, one hand resting on the armrest, his fingers drumming a slow, deliberate rhythm. The bond, he repeated. You're telling me that you, a wolfless runt who can't even shift, expect me to believe that the moon herself chose you to stand beside me? The word wolfless hit her like a slap. She'd heard it 1,000 times before. Whispered behind her back, spat in her face, carved into her skin by people who thought she deserved it. But hearing it from him, from the one person who was supposed to see her as more than that, it felt different. It felt like betrayal. I don't expect you to believe anything, Kaela said quietly, but it doesn't change the truth. Vera Blackwood leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. The truth, she said, her voice dripping with disdain, is that you are an embarrassment to this pack. You have no wolf, no strength, no value, and yet you dare to stand before the Alpha King and claim a bond that would make you queen? I'm not claiming anything, Kaela shot back, her temper flaring despite her best efforts to stay calm. I'm telling you what is. The bond exists. He felt it. I felt it. That's not something you can just ignore because it's inconvenient. Inconvenient? Marcus barked out a laugh. That's what you think this is? You think the Alpha King being mated to a wolfless nothing is just inconvenient? What I think, Kaela said, turning her gaze to him, is that you're all so terrified of anything that doesn't fit your neat little hierarchy that you'd rather destroy it than accept it. The room went silent. Marcus's face darkened. He took a step forward, his hands clenching into fists. Watch your mouth, runt. Or what? Kaela asked. You'll kill me? Go ahead. At least then I won't have to stand here and listen to you pretend you're better than you are. Garrett backhanded her across the face before Marcus could respond. The force of it sent her sprawling to the floor, her cheek exploding with pain, blood filling her mouth. The chains caught her fall, jarring her wrists hard enough to make her gasp. Stars burst across her vision. Enough, Darian said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a blade. The room fell silent again, everyone turning to look at him. Kaela pushed herself up to her knees, spitting blood onto the stone floor. Her vision swam, but she forced herself to focus, to look up at Darian. He was standing now. The room went deathly still. He descended the steps slowly, each footfall echoing like a death knell. When he reached her, he stopped close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off his skin, close enough that the bond screamed at her to reach out, to touch him, to claim him. She didn't move. Darian looked down at her, his golden eyes cold and unreadable. You want to know the truth? He asked softly. Kaela said nothing. Her mouth was full of blood, and her jaw throbbed where Garrett had hit her. The truth, Darian continued, is that the Northern Reach is surrounded by enemies. The Eastern Pacts want our territory. The Southern Coalition wants our resources. The Mountain Clans want our blood. I have a kingdom to protect, a people to lead, and I can't do that with a weak mate at my side. I'm not weak, Kaela said. The words came out thick and slurred. You can't shift, Darian replied. You have no wolf, no strength, no power. What use are you to me? What use are you to anyone? The words landed like stones, each one heavier than the last. Kaela stared up at him, her heart pounding, her entire body trembling with rage and pain, and something darker, something that coiled in her chest like a living thing. You felt the bond, she said. You know what it means. You can't just... I can do whatever I want, Darian interrupted. I'm the Alpha King. He crouched down in front of her, so close now that she could see the flecks of amber in his eyes, could smell the pine and leather scent that clung to his skin. The bond thrummed between them, desperate, pleading, trying to hold on. For just a second, his mask slipped. She saw pain flash across his face, saw his jaw clench, saw his hand twitch like he wanted to reach for her. Then it was gone. You're not my mate, he said softly. You're a mistake. The bond thrummed one last time, a desperate plea. Darian ignored it. I, Darian Voss, Alpha King of the Northern Reach, reject you, Kaela Thorn, as my mate and equal. The bond shattered. It didn't fade. It didn't weaken. It shattered like glass thrown against stone, and the pain that followed was unlike anything Kaela had ever felt. It tore through her chest, ripped down her spine, set every nerve on fire until she couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but hurt. She fell forward, her hand slamming against the stone, her body convulsing as the severed bond tried to kill her from the inside out. It felt like someone had reached into her chest and ripped out her heart, like every bone in her body was breaking at once, like her soul was being torn in half. The crowd erupted. Cheers, laughter, howls of approval. They loved it, loved watching her break, loved knowing that she was exactly what they'd always said she was, nothing. Somewhere in the chaos she heard Vera's voice. Finally, some sense. And Marcus, should have done this weeks ago, saved us all the trouble. And Lissa, her voice dripping with satisfaction. I told you she was lying. Darian stood and turned away from her like she didn't exist. Get her out of my sight, he said to the guards. His voice was steady, calm, like he hadn't just destroyed someone. Exile her beyond the borders. If she returns, kill her. Garrett and Finn hauled her to her feet. Kaela's vision swam, her body still screaming from the severed bond, but she forced herself to look up one last time. Darian was already walking back to his throne, his shoulders straight, his expression blank. He didn't look back. Not once. They dragged her through the streets like a criminal. The pack had gathered to watch. Hundreds of them, lining the roads, pressing against the buildings, their faces twisted with contempt and satisfaction. This was entertainment for them, a spectacle, something to break up the monotony of their lives. Wolfless freak! Should have been drowned at birth. Good riddance. My mother always said your bloodline was cursed. Someone threw a rock. It hit her in the shoulder, sharp and hard enough to bruise. Another followed, catching her in the ribs. Then another and another. The guards didn't stop them. Garrett was grinning like this was the best day of his life. Kaela kept her eyes forward. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She wouldn't beg, wouldn't plead, wouldn't give them anything, but inside she was screaming. A woman, Kaela recognized her as the baker's wife, spat in her face as they passed. "You're a disgrace," she hissed. "I always knew there was something wrong with you." A man shoved past the guards and grabbed Kayla's hair, yanking her head back hard enough to make her neck crack. "You really thought you were good enough for the king?" he sneered. His breath smelled like ale and rotting teeth. "Look at you. You're nothing. Less than nothing." Finn shoved him back, but not hard. Not like he actually cared. "Move along," he said, grinning. "You'll get your turn. We've got a long walk ahead." They dragged her through the market square, past the blacksmith's forge, where she'd spent hours as a child watching the smith work, past the healer's cottage where old Marta had once bandaged her wounds and told her stories, past the well where she'd drawn water every morning for 10 years, past every place she had ever known, every memory, every moment, every tiny piece of the life she'd tried to build here. The crowd followed them like a parade, jeering and throwing things. Someone threw a rotten apple that splattered against her back. Someone else threw mud that got in her hair, her eyes, her mouth. A group of children, couldn't have been older than 7 or 8, started chanting, "Wolfless, wolfless, broken, and cursed. Wolfless, wolfless, she's the worst." Their parents laughed and encouraged them. Kaela stumbled, her legs threatening to give out, but Garrett yanked her upright. "Oh no," he said mockingly. "You don't get to collapse yet. We're not even halfway there." By the time they reached the northern gate, the border between the kingdom and the wild frontier beyond, her face was bleeding, her clothes torn, her body covered in cuts and bruises. Blood ran down her chin from where she'd bitten through her lip trying not to scream. Her left eye was swelling shut. The gate loomed ahead, massive and iron-bound, with guards stationed on either side. Beyond it, the forest stretched out like a dark, hungry mouth. The frontier, the wild lands, the place where exiles went to die. Garrett shoved her forward, and she stumbled, barely catching herself before she fell face first into the dirt. "Don't come back," he said. "Next time we won't be so merciful." Finn laughed. "Merciful? We should have just killed her here, would have been kinder." "King's orders," Garrett replied. "Exile, not execution. Though between you and me, I don't think she'll last 3 days out there." "I'll give her one," Finn said. 2 if she's lucky." They unchained her wrists. The iron had rubbed her skin raw, left angry red welts that would probably scar. Then they shoved her through the gate. Kaela stumbled into the dirt on the other side, her hands scraping against the ground, her entire body aching. Every breath hurt. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain through her. The gate slammed shut behind her with a sound like thunder. The guards' laughter echoed for a moment, then faded. And just like that, she was alone. Kaela knelt there in the dirt for a long time, staring at the ground, her mind blank. The pain from the severed bond had faded to a dull, throbbing ache, but it was still there, gnawing at her insides like a parasite. Every breath hurt. Every heartbeat felt wrong, like her body couldn't quite remember how to function without that connection. She should get up, should move, should do something, but she couldn't, because for the first time in her life, she had nothing left to fight for. No pack, no home, no mate, no future, nothing. The forest around her was silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence, but the kind that came before something terrible happened. The kind that made the hair on the back of your neck stand up. The kind that told you predators were watching. She forced herself to stand, her legs shaking beneath her. Pain shot up her spine, made her vision blur for a second. The frontier stretched out in every direction, dark and endless. No roads, no paths, just trees that grew too close together and shadows that moved when they shouldn't. This was where people came to die. The sun was already setting, painting the sky in shades of red and orange that looked too much like blood. She had maybe an hour of daylight left, maybe less. She needed to find shelter, find water, find something. Kaela looked back at the gate one last time. At the kingdom that had thrown her away, at the pack that had never wanted her, at the life she'd tried so hard to build. Then she turned and walked into the forest. The first hour wasn't so bad. The trees were thick here, their canopy blocking out most of the dying light, but there were still traces of a path. Animals used this route, she could tell, deer probably, and maybe rabbits. She followed it deeper into the woods, her bare feet silent on the moss-covered ground. Everything hurt. Her face throbbed where Garrett had hit her, her ribs ached from the rocks, her wrists burned from the chains, and beneath it all that constant, gnawing pain from the severed bond. But she kept walking. What else was there to do? The path eventually disappeared, swallowed by undergrowth and fallen logs. Kaela pushed forward anyway, shoving aside branches that caught at her torn clothes, climbing over roots that seemed determined to trip her. The second hour was worse. True darkness fell like a curtain, and suddenly she couldn't see more than a few feet in front of her. The moon was new, no light to guide her. She had to feel her way forward, hands outstretched, feet testing every step. That's when she heard the first sounds, rustling in the undergrowth, the crack of a branch, something breathing that wasn't her. Kaela froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She wasn't alone. Something was out there, something big, judging by the sounds, and it was following her. She started moving again, faster this time, trying to put distance between herself and whatever was stalking her. But the faster she moved, the louder the sounds got. Like whatever was out there wanted her to know it was there, wanted her to be afraid. She stumbled over a root and went down hard, her hands slamming into the ground. Pain exploded up her wrists. The sound stopped. Kaela held her breath, listening. Nothing. Then, a growl, low and deep, vibrating through the air like thunder. She scrambled to her feet and ran. Branches whipped at her face, tore at her clothes, but she didn't care. She just ran, blind in the darkness, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Behind her, she could hear it giving chase. Heavy footfalls. The crash of something big moving through the underbrush. Kaela's foot caught on something and she went sprawling again, this time rolling down a small embankment. She hit the bottom hard, the wind knocked out of her. She couldn't run anymore. She could barely breathe. So she did the only thing she could think of. She crawled into the hollow beneath a massive oak tree, squeezing herself into the space between the roots, making herself as small as possible. And she waited. The footsteps got closer, closer, then stopped, right outside her hiding place. Kaela pressed her hand over her mouth, trying to muffle the sound of her breathing. Her heart was pounding so loud she was sure whatever was out there could hear it. A shadow passed in front of the hollow, then another, then a third. 3 of them. Wolves. Wild ones, based on their behavior, larger than the pack wolves she was used to, more savage. These weren't creatures who lived by rules or hierarchy. These were pure predators. One of them sniffed at the entrance to the hollow. Its nose was massive, black and wet, its breath hot and rancid. Kaela didn't move, didn't breathe. The wolf growled, a sound that made her bones vibrate, and then pulled back. For a moment she thought they were leaving. Then the first one lunged into the hollow. Kaela screamed and kicked out, her foot connecting with its muzzle. The wolf yelped and pulled back, but another was already taking its place. This one grabbed her ankle, its teeth sinking deep into her flesh. Kaela screamed again, pain exploding up her leg as she tried to kick free. The third wolf lunged for her throat, and then something inside her snapped. Not broke, not gave way. Snapped, like a chain that had been holding something back for far too long. The power that had been sleeping inside her, the thing she'd buried since childhood, the thing her mother had warned her about, erupted. A sound tore out of her throat. Not a scream, not a howl, a roar. Raw and primal and so full of rage that it shook the trees, rattled the earth, sent birds scattering from their roosts half a mile away. The wolves froze, their ears flattened against their skulls, their tails tucking between their legs. The one holding her ankle let go instantly, whimpering. They weren't looking at prey anymore. They were looking at something that terrified them. Then they ran. All 3 of them, crashing through the underbrush like the devil himself was on their heels, their panicked yelps fading into the distance. Kaela sat there, gasping for air, her entire body vibrating with a power she didn't recognize. What the hell was that? She looked down at her hands. They looked normal. Human. But the feeling, gods, the feeling, was still there, coiled beneath her skin like a serpent waiting to strike. She'd felt this before, years ago, when she was a child, when she was 5 years old and another child had pushed her down a well. She'd been trapped down there for hours, in the cold and the dark, and something inside her had woken up, something angry, something that had pulled her out of that well with strength a 5-year-old shouldn't have had. Her mother had been waiting at the top, had grabbed her by the shoulders, her eyes wide with fear. "You're different, Kaela," her mother had said, her voice shaking. "Different in a way they won't understand. If they find out what you are, they'll kill you. Do you understand? They'll kill you, so you bury it. You bury it deep and you never, ever let it out again." So Kaela had buried it, pushed it down so deep she'd almost convinced herself it didn't exist, convinced herself she was just wolfless, just broken. But now, out here, with no one watching, no one judging, maybe she didn't have to pretend anymore. Nuts. She didn't sleep that night. She stayed curled up in the hollow, her body shaking, her mind racing. Every sound made her jump. Every shadow looked like a threat. But nothing came back. When dawn finally broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Kaela crawled out of the hollow and assessed the damage. Her ankle was torn up pretty badly, deep puncture wounds that were still bleeding. She tore a strip off her already ruined shirt and wrapped it as best she could. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She was thirsty, desperately thirsty. Her mouth felt like it was full of sand. She needed to find water. She limped through the forest, following the sound of running water. It took her almost an hour, but she finally found a stream, small and fast-moving, the water clear and cold. She knelt beside it and drank deeply, not caring that the water made her stomach cramp. She hadn't had anything to drink since yesterday morning. When she was done, she sat back and looked at her reflection in the water. She barely recognized herself. Her face was bruised and swollen, covered in cuts and scrapes. Her hair was matted with blood and mud. Her eyes looked different, wilder, more alert, more predatory. Kaela stared at her reflection for a long time. Then she stood and kept walking. The days that followed blurred together into a haze of pain and survival. She walked. She ate whatever she could find, roots, berries, anything that looked remotely edible. She drank from streams and slept in caves and hollows, and every night the power inside her grew stronger. It whispered to her in the dark, promised her things. Strength, freedom, revenge. All she had to do was let go. But she was afraid, because if she let it out, if she stopped fighting it, she didn't know what she'd become. On the 5th day, she caught her first rabbit. It was small and scrawny, barely a meal, but it was something. She'd been tracking it for hours, moving through the underbrush with a patience she didn't know she had. Her wounded ankle had started to heal, faster than it should have, and she could move almost normally again. When the rabbit finally stopped to nibble on some grass, she pounced. Her hands moved faster than she thought possible, grabbing the rabbit by the scruff before it could bolt. It kicked and squealed, but she held tight, her fingers digging into its fur. For a moment, she just stared at it, at the life in her hands, at how easy it would be to end it. Then she twisted its neck, quick and clean. The sound was small, quiet, but it felt like thunder in her ears. She'd killed something, not in self-defense, not by accident. She'd hunted it, caught it, and killed it. And she felt nothing. No guilt, no remorse, just hunger. Kaela built a fire that night, small and carefully hidden in a depression between 2 rocks, and roasted the rabbit over the flames. She didn't have tools, so she had to tear it apart with her hands and teeth. The meat was tough and gamey and probably half-cooked, but it was the best thing she'd tasted in days. As she ate, she stared into the fire and thought about what she'd become. A week ago, she'd been a member of the pack. Wolfless, yes. Outcast, yes. But still part of something. Still connected to civilization, to rules, to the pretense of being human. Now? Now she was alone in the wilderness, eating meat she'd killed with her bare hands, with something ancient and angry living under her skin. Now she was nothing, or maybe she was something else entirely. On the 7th day, she found the clearing. It was small, tucked between 2 hills, with a creek running through the center and wildflowers growing in patches along the banks. Peaceful, quiet, beautiful in a way that made her chest ache. The kind of place people wrote songs about. Kaela knelt by the creek and cupped her hands, drinking deeply. The water was so cold it made her teeth hurt, but it helped clear her head, helped push back the exhaustion that had been creeping in for days. When she looked up, she saw her reflection in the still water near the bank. She barely recognized herself. Her face was thinner, sharper, her cheekbones more pronounced. The bruises had faded to ugly yellow-green marks. Her hair, which had always been a dull brown, now seemed darker, streaked with something that looked almost black. And her eyes weren't brown anymore. They were amber, bright and glowing, like a predator's, like a wolf's. Except she wasn't a wolf. She was something else. Kaela stared at her reflection for a long time, her heart pounding. The thing inside her stirred, responding to her attention. It wanted out, wanted to stretch and run and hunt, wanted to stop hiding. She stood abruptly, backing away from the water. Not yet. She wasn't ready yet. She spent the rest of that day in the clearing, letting her body rest, trying to ignore the power that hummed beneath her skin. But that night, lying on a bed of moss with the stars visible through the canopy above, she finally admitted the truth to herself. She wasn't going to be able to keep it buried much longer. Whatever she was, whatever lived inside her, it was done waiting. Well, the transformation happened on the 10th day. She'd been hunting again, tracking a deer through the underbrush. She'd been following it for hours, learning its patterns, waiting for the right moment to strike. The deer was bigger than anything she'd tried to hunt before. If she could bring it down, she'd have meat for days. She was crouched behind a fallen log, watching the deer graze in a small meadow, when she felt it. The pull, the shift, the power rising up inside her like a tidal wave. No, not now, not yet. She tried to fight it, tried to push it back down where it belonged, but it was too late. The change tore through her body with a violence that stole her breath. It wasn't like the pack wolves described shifting. They always talked about it like it was natural, easy, like slipping into a second skin. This was nothing like that. This was war. Her bones cracked and reformed, the sound echoing through the forest like gunshots. Muscles stretched and coiled, tendons pulling tight enough to snap. Her skin rippled and hardened, fur erupting from every pore. Her jaw elongated, her teeth growing into fangs that could tear through steel. She fell to her hands and knees, gasping, screaming, her vision going white with pain. And then, silence. Kaela opened her eyes. The world looked different, sharper, brighter. Every scent, every sound, every movement magnified 100-fold. She could smell the deer 50 yards away, could hear its heartbeat, could sense the fear starting to creep in as it realized something was wrong. She looked down at herself. Her hands, they weren't hands anymore. They were claws, black as night, curved and deadly, each one the length of a dagger. Her arms were covered in dark fur, her muscles more defined than they'd ever been. She turned her head, catching a glimpse of herself in a puddle nearby. What stared back wasn't a wolf. It was a creature out of nightmares, larger than any wolf she'd ever seen, maybe twice the size. With fur the color of shadow and smoke, so dark it seemed to absorb light. Eyes that burned like molten gold, bright and fierce and aware. Her body was lean and powerful, built for speed and violence, with muscles that coiled like springs under her skin. Her jaw was filled with fangs that looked like they could crush bone. Her claws looked like they could rend steel. This was what she'd been hiding. This was what she was. Not broken, not wolfless, something far more dangerous. Something that shouldn't exist. Kaela threw back her head and roared. The sound echoed through the forest, shaking the trees, sending birds scattering into the sky. It wasn't a wolf's howl. It was something older, something primal, something that made every living thing within a mile radius freeze in terror. The deer bolted. Without thinking, Kaela gave chase. She moved like liquid shadow, flowing through the forest faster than she'd ever moved in her life. The deer was fast, but she was faster. She closed the distance in seconds, her claws digging into the earth, propelling her forward. The deer tried to dodge, but she was already there. She brought it down with a single swipe of her claws, her jaws closing around its throat before it could even scream. The kill was instant, clean, and it felt right. Kaela stood over the deer's body, her chest heaving, blood dripping from her muzzle. This was what she was meant to be. Not hiding, not pretending, not weak. This. She spent the next week learning how to control the shifts, how to move in this new body, how to hunt. It came easier than she expected, like something buried deep in her bones had finally woken up and remembered what it was supposed to do. She was faster than any wolf, stronger, deadlier. Her senses were sharper than anything she'd imagined. She could track prey for miles by scent alone, could hear a heartbeat from 100 yards away, could see in complete darkness like it was daylight. And she was hungry. Not just for food, for everything she'd been denied her whole life. For freedom, for power, for revenge. The more she shifted, the easier it became, the less it hurt. Until finally, the transformation was as natural as breathing. She started testing her limits. She could run for hours without getting tired. She could take down prey 3 times her size. She could fight. And she could kill. The frontier became her hunting ground, her territory, and she was its apex predator. The rumors started 2 weeks after her exile. A merchant passing through the border town brought stories of something in the woods, a shadow, a monster, something that killed without mercy. The pack elders dismissed it as superstition. Travelers always told tall tales about the frontier. It was part of the mystique. But then hunters started disappearing. 5 of them went into the frontier to investigate the rumors. None came back. Search parties found what was left of them 3 days later. They'd been torn apart. Not by wolves. The wounds were wrong, too big, too savage. By something else. Something that shouldn't exist. The pack sent more hunters. They didn't come back either. And deep in the forest, far from the eyes of the kingdom, Kaela Thorn learned what it meant to stop pretending. She learned how to hunt, how to kill, how to survive. She learned that she'd spent her entire life being afraid of the wrong thing. She'd been afraid of being different, being broken, being rejected. But what she should have been afraid of was what would happen when she finally stopped holding back. Because the people who threw her away had made a mistake, a fatal one. They'd assumed she was weak. They'd assumed she'd die out here. They'd assumed wrong. Kaela stood on a cliff overlooking the kingdom in the distance, the wind whipping through her dark hair, her amber eyes glowing in the moonlight. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was getting stronger, and soon, very soon, she would return. Not as the girl they rejected, not as the broken wolf they threw away, but as the monster they created, and they would learn what it meant to fear. The first patrol went missing on a Tuesday. Marcus Crane stood in the council chamber at dawn, staring at the map spread across the oak table, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. 5 red marks indicated where bodies had been found over the past 2 weeks. 7 black marks showed where hunting parties had simply vanished without a trace. No bodies, no blood, nothing but torn equipment and the lingering smell of fear. "It's been 3 weeks," Vera Blackwood said from her seat near the window, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. 3 weeks and 12 dead. 15 if you count the ones we haven't found yet. How much longer before you admit we have a real problem? "We're handling it," Marcus replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Are we?" Vera's laugh was bitter. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like something is systematically hunting our people, and we have absolutely no idea what it is or how to stop it." Darian sat at the head of the table, silent. He'd been silent for most of the meeting, his golden eyes fixed on the map, but not really seeing it. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. His hair was unkempt. His hands rested on the table, but Marcus could see the slight tremor in his fingers. Marcus had known him long enough to recognize the signs. The king was somewhere else, somewhere dark, somewhere he didn't want to be. "The tracks don't match anything we know," said Garrett, one of the guards who dragged Kaela through the streets 3 weeks ago. He looked pale, his hands shaking as he pointed to several sketches scattered across the table. "Too big for a wolf, wrong shape for a bear. The stride length suggests something that moves on 4 legs, but the claw marks," he swallowed hard. "They're wrong. Too deep. Too precise. And the kills themselves—" "Describe them again," Vera interrupted. Garrett's face went ashen. "Clean. Too clean. Whatever it is, it knows exactly where to strike. Throats torn out in a single movement. Spines severed. One of the bodies, Jensen's, his ribcage was cracked open like someone peeled it apart with their bare hands. Someone in the room made a strangled sound. It's just an animal, Marcus said firmly. A big one, maybe. Rabid, probably. We send more hunters, better armed, with silver weapons, and we end this. We've already sent more hunters, Vera pointed out coldly. 6 parties in the last week alone. They didn't come back either. At what point do we stop throwing lives at this problem and start thinking strategically? Marcus's hands clenched into fists. Then we send soldiers. A full battalion if we have to. We carpet the entire frontier with armed wolves and we find this thing and kill it. And if that doesn't work, it will work. You said that about the last 3 parties. The room fell silent. Darian finally spoke, his voice rough like he hadn't used it in days. Where are the kills concentrated? Everyone turned to look at him. Garrett cleared his throat. Here, Your Majesty. He pointed to a cluster of marks on the map, roughly 15 miles into the frontier. There's a valley there, heavily forested, multiple water sources. Good shelter. The thing seems to be using it as a base of operations. Have any civilians been attacked? No, Your Majesty. Only hunters and scouts. People who went looking for it. It's like... Garrett hesitated. Like what? Like it only kills people who threaten it. Like it's defending territory. Darian studied the map for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he stood abruptly, the chair scraping against stone. Double the border patrols. No one crosses into the frontier without my explicit authorization. And no more hunting parties. We're not feeding it our people anymore. Your Majesty, Marcus started. That's an order, Darian said. His voice was quiet, but there was steel beneath it. The kind of steel that said he was done discussing this. Council dismissed. The others filed out slowly, murmuring amongst themselves, but Marcus lingered, waiting until the heavy door closed behind the last counselor. Then he turned to face Darian. What's going on with you? Nothing. Don't give me that. You've been a ghost for weeks. You barely eat. You don't sleep. You sit in council meetings and stare at nothing. This isn't you. I'm fine. You're falling apart. Marcus moved closer, lowering his voice. And it started the day you rejected her. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Darian's hands pressed flat against the table. I did what needed to be done. Did you? Because right now you look like someone who's dying from the inside out. The bond was a mistake. She was weak, wolfless. I made the right choice for the kingdom. For the kingdom, Marcus repeated. Not for yourself. They're the same thing. Are they? Marcus leaned against the table, studying his oldest friend. Because the Darian I know, the one who fought his way to the throne, who united 3 warring clans, who faced down the Eastern Pax alone, the Darian wouldn't let anything break him. But you look broken. Darian's jaw worked. The bond doesn't just disappear, Marcus. It doesn't fade quietly into nothing. It tears at you, claws at you from the inside, reminds you every single day, every single hour that you ripped away something that was supposed to be... He stopped, his breathing harsh. Permanent, Marcus finished softly. You ripped away something permanent. I had no choice. You had every choice. You chose the throne over her. Because the throne matters, because the pack matters, because showing weakness, accepting a wolfless mate, would have destroyed everything I've built. Darian's voice rose, echoing off the stone walls. The Eastern Packs are circling. The Southern Coalition is waiting for any sign we're vulnerable. If I'd crowned a weak queen, they would have torn us apart. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, What if she wasn't weak? Darian's head snapped up. What? The thing in the frontier, the one that's killing our hunters. What if it's not an animal at all? Don't. What if it's her? That's impossible. Is it? You said she was wolfless. But what if that's not what she is? What if she's something else entirely? Darian stared at him. You're suggesting that a girl who couldn't shift, who had no power, who was exiled into the wilderness and somehow survived, Marcus interrupted, who not only survived, but became strong enough to kill trained hunters, strong enough to terrify an entire kingdom. He paused. Strong enough to make you question everything. Get out, Darian said quietly. Darian, get out! Marcus left. Alone in the council chamber, Darian pressed his forehead against the cold stone wall and tried not to think about amber eyes and blood on stone floors. Tried not to remember the way Kaela had looked at him before the bond broke. Tried not to feel the phantom pain that lived in his chest like a second heart, constantly aching. Tried and failed. 20 miles into the frontier, Kaela crouched on a thick branch 50 feet above the forest floor, her body perfectly still, her breathing controlled and even. Below her, a patrol of 6 wolves moved through the underbrush in tight formation. She recognized the formation. Standard search pattern. They were looking for something, looking for her. The leader was Theron, a scarred wolf with a missing ear who'd been part of the pack's elite guard for 15 years. She remembered him. He'd shoved her into a mud puddle when she was 8, laughing while she cried. Had tripped her during a pack run when she was 12, making sure everyone saw her fall. He held up a fist. The patrol stopped. "Spread out," Theron said quietly, his voice carrying in the still air. "Standard search pattern. Stay within sight of each other. And keep your weapons ready. If you see anything at all, you call it out immediately." "You really think it's out here?" one of the younger wolves asked. He couldn't have been older than 20, and his voice shook slightly. "The tracks lead this way. So yes, it's out here." "What if the stories are true? What if it really is?" "It's an animal," Theron cut him off. "Just an animal. Big, yes. Dangerous, yes. But it bleeds and it dies like anything else. Now move out." The patrol fanned out, moving through the underbrush with practiced caution. Their hands gripped silver-tipped spears. Crossbows hung at their sides, loaded and ready. Kaela watched from above, perfectly still. She'd learned over the past 3 weeks that stillness was its own kind of weapon. Predators tracked movement, the flicker of prey running, the rustle of leaves, the snap of a twig. But something that didn't move, that barely breathed, that became part of the landscape, that was invisible. She could kill them. It would be easy. Drop down from above, shift mid-fall, tear through them before they even realized what was happening. She'd done it before. 3 times now, when patrols had gotten too close to her den. But she didn't. Because she was learning something else out here in the wilderness. Something more valuable than hunting or killing. She was learning patience. The patrol moved on, never looking up, never realizing that death had been watching them from above. When they were far enough away that even her enhanced hearing couldn't pick up their footsteps, Kaela dropped from the branch. She landed in a crouch that made no sound at all, her body absorbing the impact like water. Her human form moved differently now than it had 3 weeks ago. Lighter, more fluid, more precise. Like every muscle and bone had been rebuilt with a purpose. She straightened and headed deeper into the forest, toward the cave system she'd claimed as her own. It was a good location, hidden, defensible, with multiple exits and a natural water source. She'd spent days preparing it, lining the floor with moss and pine needles, storing dried meat in the deeper chambers where the temperature stayed cool. Making it home. When she was 50 yards from the cave entrance, she smelled it. Human, female, young. Someone was in her territory. Kaela's body shifted without conscious thought, flowing from human to beast in the space between heartbeats. It still felt strange, this transformation. Not painful anymore. She'd learned to control that. But alien. Like stepping into a body that was simultaneously hers and not hers. The beast form was massive, easily twice the size of any wolf she'd ever seen, with fur so dark it seemed to absorb light. Her muscles coiled like steel cables beneath her skin. Her claws were black and curved, each one as long as a hunting knife. And her eyes, she'd seen them reflected in water, burned like molten gold. She crept forward, silent as smoke despite her size, following the scent trail to the cave entrance. Inside, huddled near the back wall where Kaela kept her bedding, was a girl, 12 years old, maybe 13, rail thin, her clothes torn and filthy, her face streaked with dirt and tears. She had a cut above her left eye that was still bleeding sluggishly, and her hands were scraped raw. The girl looked up as Kaela entered, and her eyes went wide with terror. She tried to scream, but only a whimper came out. Kaela stopped, her massive form filling the cave entrance, blocking the light. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then Kaela shifted back to human. The transformation seemed to terrify the girl even more than the beast form had. She pressed herself against the cave wall, shaking violently. "Who are you?" Kaela asked. Her voice came out rough and unused. She hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. The girl's mouth opened and closed several times before sound came out. Sarah Greenwood." Kaela recognized the name. The Greenwood family lived on the eastern edge of the pack's territory. The father was a tanner. The mother had died years ago. She tried to remember, 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. "What are you doing out here, Sarah Greenwood?" "I ran away." The words tumbled out in a rush. "My father, he sold me to a merchant from the Southern Coalition. Old man, smelled like rot and sour wine. Said he needed a wife, someone young, and—" Her voice broke. I couldn't do it. So I ran and I got lost, and I've been out here for 2 days, and I'm so hungry, and please don't kill me." Kaela studied her. The girl was telling the truth. She could smell the fear, but underneath it was something else. Desperation. The kind that came from having absolutely nowhere else to go. She knew that feeling intimately. "I'm not going to kill you," Kaela said. "You're the monster," Sarah whispered. "Everyone's talking about it. The shadow in the woods. The thing that's been killing hunters. They say you eat people. I don't eat people. I kill people who try to kill me. There's a difference." Sarah stared at her, confusion warring with fear in her eyes. "But you just turned into— How are you? What are you?" "I don't know," Kaela admitted. "Not wolf, not quite human. Something else." "Are there more like you?" "I hope not." Sarah made a sound that might have been a laugh if she wasn't so terrified. Then she winced, pressing a hand to her ribs. Kayla's eyes narrowed. "You're hurt." "It's nothing, just bruises from when my father—" She stopped abruptly, her face going pale. Something cold and dark coiled in Kayla's chest. "Your father did this to you? Before he sold you?" Sarah nodded, not meeting her eyes. "He said I was being difficult, that I should be grateful someone wanted to marry me at all, that I was too ugly and too stupid to attract a proper husband on my own, so I should take what I could get." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Then he hit me. A lot." Kayla's hands clenched into fists. She knew what that felt like. Knew what it was like to be hurt by people who were supposed to protect you. Knew the particular kind of pain that came from being told you were worthless by the very people who should have valued you most. She moved to the back of the cave and retrieved a piece of dried venison from her store. She brought it back and held it out. "Eat this, slowly. Your stomach isn't used to food anymore." Sarah took it with shaking hands and bit into it like she was starving, which she probably was. Kaela watched her for a moment, then moved to the cave entrance and stared out at the forest. What was she supposed to do with a runaway child? She couldn't send her back, not to a father who'd beaten her and sold her like livestock. But she couldn't keep her here either. The frontier was too dangerous. "Why did you help me?" Sarah asked between bites. "I didn't. You broke into my home. But you gave me food. And you're not killing me. That's helping." "That doesn't mean anything." "Yes, it does." Sarah finished the meat and wiped her mouth with the back of her hand. "The others, the ones in the pack, they say you're evil, cursed, that you were thrown out because you're abomination. But you're being kind to me." "I'm not kind. I just don't kill children." "That's more than most people." Kaela turned to look at her. "How old are you?" 13. Almost 14. "You're too young to be out here alone." "I'm too young to be sold to a 60-year-old man too, but that didn't stop my father." "Fair point." Kaela sighed and sat down near the cave entrance, her back against the stone wall. "You can stay tonight. Tomorrow I'll show you the safest route back to the border. There are other packs, other places you could go." "I'm not going back." "You can't stay in the frontier. You'll die." "I'll die if I go back." Sarah's voice cracked, echoing off the cave walls. "They'll drag me back to my father, and he'll sell me again, and this time I won't be able to run. Or they'll punish me for running in the first place. Either way, I'm dead. At least out here I have a chance." Kaela stared at her, at this scared, desperate child who had nowhere else to go and no one else to turn to. Just like she'd had nowhere to go 3 weeks ago when they'd thrown her through the northern gate. "One night," she said finally. "We'll figure out the rest tomorrow." Sarah's shoulders sagged with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. The frontier doesn't care about your gratitude. It'll kill you just as dead whether you're polite or not." But despite the harsh words, Kaela found herself pulling out more food, some dried berries and nuts she'd gathered, and sharing them with the girl. And when night fell and the temperature dropped, she didn't object when Sarah curled up near her for warmth. Well, Sarah stayed for 3 days. then a week, then 2. Kaela told herself it was temporary, that she'd find a solution, maybe get the girl to a neighboring pack, one of the smaller ones that might take in a refugee. Somewhere safer than the Northern Reach, somewhere the girl could start over. But Sarah proved useful. She knew plants. Her mother had been a healer before she died, and Sarah had learned which herbs could treat wounds, which roots were edible, which mushrooms would kill you if you ate them. She could set snares for rabbits that actually worked, could weave baskets from reeds to store food, could keep watch while Kaela slept, her eyes sharp despite her youth. And if Kaela was being honest, which she rarely was, even with herself, it was nice not to be alone. They fell into a routine. Kaela hunted in the early mornings and late evenings when game was most active. Sarah gathered during the day, staying close to the cave, learning the terrain. They ate together, talked occasionally, though neither was much for conversation. Sarah never asked about the pack, never mentioned Darien or the rejection or any of it, for which Kaela was profoundly grateful. On the 10th day of Sarah's stay, they were sitting outside the cave in the late afternoon sun. Sarah was mending a tear in her shirt with a needle made from bone and thread pulled from plant fibers, another skill her mother had taught her. "Will you teach me?" Sarah asked suddenly. Kaela looked up from the rabbit she was skinning. "Teach you what?" "To fight. To hunt. To be—" She gestured vaguely at Kaela. "Like you, strong." Kaela was quiet for a moment, her hand still on the rabbit. "Why?" "Because I'm tired of being weak. Tired of people hurting me because they can. Tired of running and hiding and hoping someone will save me." Sarah's hands clenched around the shirt she was mending. "You're the first person who didn't try to hurt me or use me, and you're the strongest person I've ever seen, so teach me, please." "I'm not a teacher. You don't have to be. Just show me what you do. How you survive. How you became this." She waved at Kaela again, encompassing everything she was. Kaela studied her. The girl was serious. There was a hardness in her eyes that hadn't been there 2 weeks ago. The frontier was already changing her, stripping away the soft parts and exposing something sharper underneath. Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing, to pass on what she'd learned, to help someone the way no one had helped her. "Fine," she said, "but if you're going to learn, you learn it right. No complaining, no giving up, no crying when it hurts." Sarah's face lit up like Kaela had just offered her the world. "I won't. I promise. We'll see." The training was brutal. Kaela didn't believe in going easy. If Sarah wanted to survive out here, she needed to be hard, needed to be fast, needed to know how to take pain and keep moving. They started with basics. How to move quietly through the underbrush without disturbing leaves or snapping twigs. How to read tracks. The difference between deer prints and wolf prints. How to tell how old a trail was, which direction the animal was heading. How to find water sources and test them for safety. How to identify edible plants from poisonous ones. Sarah absorbed it all like a sponge, her young mind quick and eager. After a week of basics, they moved to fighting. "You're small," Kaela said on the first day of combat training. "You'll always be smaller than most opponents. So you don't fight fair. You fight smart." She taught Sarah how to use speed over strength, how to dodge instead of block, how to strike at vulnerable points, eyes, throat, knees, groin, how to turn an opponent's momentum against them. Sarah was clumsy at first, tripping over her own feet, telegraphing her movements. But she had something Kaela recognized immediately: rage. The kind that came from being hurt too many times. The kind that burned hot and constant beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to explode. Kaela taught her how to use that rage, how to channel it into focus instead of letting it make her reckless, how to make it a weapon instead of a weakness. "Again," Kaela said, circling Sarah in the small clearing they used for training. Sarah lunged, trying to sweep Kayla's legs out from under her. Kaela sidestepped easily and tapped her on the shoulder. "Dead, you committed too early. I'm trying. Try smarter. Think about what I'm going to do, not what you want to do." Sarah growled, an almost wolfish sound despite her human form, and lunged again. This time she feinted left and went right, almost catching Kaela off guard. Almost. Kaela caught her wrist mid-strike and twisted, dropping Sarah to the ground in a controlled fall. "Better. You're learning to think." Sarah grinned up at her from the dirt, breathing hard. "Again." They went again, and again, and again. By the time the sun set, Sarah could barely stand. Her arms trembled with exhaustion. Bruises were already forming on her ribs and shoulders where she'd taken falls. But she was still smiling. "Same time tomorrow?" she asked, limping slightly as they walked back to the cave. "Same time," Kaela confirmed. "Rest tonight. Your muscles need time to rebuild." "Will it always hurt this much?" "For a while. Then your body adapts and it hurts less, but it never stops completely. Pain is how you know you're pushing your limits." Sarah nodded, filing that away. Then she asked, "Why are you helping me?" "Really?" Kaela was quiet for a long moment. "Because no one helped me when I needed it. And maybe," she paused, "maybe I don't want to be the kind of person who walks away from someone who needs help." "Even though the pack walked away from you?" "Especially because of that." They walked the rest of the way in comfortable silence. As Sarah settled in for the night, curling up in her makeshift bed of moss and furs, Kaela stayed outside, staring up at the stars. She'd thought exile would destroy her, thought being cast out would break her completely. Instead, it was rebuilding her into something new, something stronger, something that didn't need the pack's approval to know her own worth. The attack came 3 weeks after Sarah arrived. Kaela woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of Sarah screaming. She was on her feet and shifted before her eyes were fully open, her beast form erupting from her human skin in a burst of shadow and controlled violence. The transformation was instant now. No pain, no hesitation, just a seamless flow from one form to another. Fire. The forest around this cave was burning. Someone had set multiple fires in a ring pattern, creating a trap. The flames were spreading fast, feeding on dry undergrowth and old deadfall. And there were wolves, dozens of them, in both human and beast forms, spreading out in a coordinated hunting formation that spoke of military training. This wasn't a random patrol. This was an organized assault. Kaela burst from the cave entrance, her eyes immediately finding Sarah. The girl was being dragged toward the trees by 2 wolves Kaela didn't recognize. Mercenaries, probably, hired from outside the pack. Sarah was fighting with everything she'd learned, kicking and scratching and biting, but they were too strong. Kaela roared. The sound shook the trees, made the flames flicker and dance, sent birds scattering from their roosts half a mile away. Every wolf within 100 yards froze, their heads snapping toward her with expressions of pure terror. She didn't give them time to recover. She moved like lightning given flesh, crossing the 30 yards to Sarah in 3 massive bounds. Her claws tore through the first wolf's throat before he even registered her presence, the arterial spray painting the ground red. The second tried to shift to defend himself, but she was already there. She caught him mid-transformation, her jaws closing around his spine and twisting. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Sarah stumbled backward, her eyes wide with shock and something else. Awe, maybe, or fear. Blood had splattered across her face. "Run!" Kaela snarled, her voice in beast form deep and resonant. "Deep forest. The cave we found last week. Don't stop. Don't look back." "But go!" Sarah ran. Kaela turned to face the rest of the hunting party. They were regrouping now, forming a defensive circle around her, cutting off escape routes. She counted quickly, 23 wolves in total, maybe more in the shadows beyond the firelight. Professional soldiers, armed with silver-tipped weapons. This was going to hurt. At the front of the pack stood Marcus Crane in his wolf form, a massive gray beast with scars across his muzzle and eyes like cold steel. He was bigger than most alphas, built like a battering ram with fangs that could crush bone, and next to him, slightly behind, was Darian. Kaela's heart slammed against her ribs so hard it hurt. He looked terrible. Thinner than she remembered, like he hadn't eaten in weeks. Hollow-eyed. His fur in wolf form was dull and unkempt. He looked like someone who was dying from the inside out. Their eyes met across the burning clearing. For a moment that stretched like eternity, the world stopped. The fires, the other wolves, the blood. All of it faded away until there was nothing but the 2 of them, staring at each other across an unbridgeable distance. The bond might be broken, but the recognition was still there. The knowledge of what they'd almost been. What they could have been. Then Darian shifted to human form. He was naked except for the loose pants he'd worn for easy shifting, his chest bare, revealing the lean muscle and scars of a warrior. But it was his face that held her, the exhaustion, the pain, the regret written in every line. "Kaela," he said. His voice was hoarse, like he'd been screaming. She didn't shift, didn't speak, just stared at him with eyes that burned like molten gold, her muscles coiled and ready to spring. "You've been killing my hunters," Darian continued, each word seeming to cost him. "Terrorizing the borders. 12 dead in 3 weeks. I can't let that continue." Kayla's lips pulled back, showing fangs the length of daggers. Marcus shifted to human form as well, a silver-tipped spear in his hands. "We gave you exile. You should have run farther, should have disappeared completely." "I did disappear," Kaela said, her voice in this form deeper, rougher, barely recognizable as human speech. "You came looking for me. Because you became a threat to the entire kingdom. I became free." Darian flinched at that word like she'd struck him. "Stand down," he said quietly. "Come back to the kingdom peacefully, and we can find a solution. A way to..." "To what?" Kaela interrupted. "Execute me? Cage me? Turn me into your weapon? Make me kneel in front of the pack that threw me away?" She took a step forward, and several wolves stepped back involuntarily. "I'm not coming back. Not as your prisoner, not as anything." "Then you leave us no choice," Marcus said, raising the spear. The silver tip gleamed in the firelight. Kayla's muscles coiled, ready to spring. She could kill maybe 10 of them before they brought her down. Not good odds, but she'd take as many as she could. But Darian raised his hand. "Wait." Everyone froze. Darian stepped forward, alone, his eyes never leaving Kaela. "Is it true? What they say about you? That you're not just a wolf?" "I was never just a wolf," Kaela said. "I tried to tell you that. Tried to show you. You didn't want to see it. What are you then? Does it matter? You already decided I wasn't good enough. That I was broken. A mistake." She threw his words back at him, and he flinched again. "Why do you care now what I am?" Darian's jaw clenched. "Because I made a mistake." The words hung in the air like smoke from the fires. Marcus's head whipped toward Darian. "What?" "I made a mistake," Darian repeated, louder this time, his voice carrying across the clearing. "The rejection. Everything. It was wrong." "Your Majesty, you can't possibly..." "I felt the bond break," Darian said, his voice raw and broken. "I felt it tear me apart from the inside. And I felt every day since like I'm missing half my soul, like part of me died on that throne room floor. So yes, Marcus, I made a mistake. The biggest mistake of my life." Kaela stared at him, her mind reeling. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. "You don't get to do this," she said, her voice rising. "You don't get to reject me, throw me away, hunt me down like an animal, and then decide you made a mistake." "I know." "You don't know anything." Her voice rose to a roar that shook the trees. "You destroyed me. You took the one thing I thought was sacred, the one thing I thought couldn't be broken, and you shattered it like it meant nothing. You humiliated me in front of the entire pack, let them beat me, exile me, and now you stand there and say it was a mistake?" "It meant everything," Darian said, and there were tears in his eyes now. "That's why I broke it, because I was terrified. Terrified of what it would mean, what you would mean, what I would become if I let myself love you. I was a coward, Kaela. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." The apology hit her like a physical blow. She'd imagined this moment during long, sleepless nights. Dreamed of it, fantasized about him begging for forgiveness while she stood victorious over him. In her fantasies, she'd laughed, walked away, made him feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused her. But now that it was happening, all she felt was rage. Pure, incandescent rage that made her want to tear him apart. "Sorry doesn't fix this," she said. "I know. Sorry doesn't bring back what you took from me. Doesn't erase the humiliation. Doesn't heal the bond you destroyed." "I know." "Then what do you want, Darian? Why are you really here?" He took another step closer. Close enough now that she could smell him, pine and leather, and something underneath that was uniquely him, that made her beast form want to both tear him apart and pull him closer. "I want you to come home." Kaela laughed, and it came out harsh and broken, more snarl than sound. "I don't have a home. You made sure of that." "Yes, you do. With me. where you always belonged. You think I'd come back after everything? You think I'd stand beside you and pretend none of this happened? Smile and wave and be your queen like you didn't rip my heart out in front of everyone? No, I think you'd stand beside me as what you are. Powerful, dangerous, undeniable. Not as a weakness, but as my greatest strength. Not hiding, but ruling. Your Majesty, Marcus started, his voice sharp with warning. Be quiet, Darian said without looking at him. Kaela, please, let me fix this. Let you what? Make it better? Make it right? She shifted back to human form in a fluid motion, standing naked and covered in blood in the firelight. You can't fix this, Darian. You broke something that can't be repaired. The bond is gone. We're done. The bond might be broken, but I can still feel you, Darian said desperately. Still feel the echo of what we were. The ghost of it. And I know you feel it too. What I feel, Kaela said coldly, is free. For the first time in my life, I'm free. Free from the pack that never wanted me. Free from the expectations I could never meet. Free from you. She turned to walk away, her bare feet silent on the blood-soaked ground. Marcus raised his spear. You're not leaving here alive. Kaela looked at him over her shoulder, and her eyes were molten gold even in human form. Try to stop me and I'll kill every single one of you, starting with you, Marcus. You're outnumbered 20-1. And I'm faster, stronger, and angrier than all of you combined. I've already killed 2 of yours. Want to see how many more I can take down before you stop me? She smiled, and it was a predator's smile. Your odds aren't as good as you think. Marcus's grip tightened on the spear. Several other wolves raised their weapons. Let her go, Darian said quietly. What? Let her go. Your Majesty, we came here to eliminate a threat. I know why we came here, and I'm telling you to stand down. Darian's voice was firm, final. The voice of an alpha king who would not be questioned. She's right. We hunted her. We drove her to this. And if we try to force her back now, she'll kill half of us and hate me forever. So I'm letting her go. For now, he added, looking at Kaela. I'm letting you go for now. For forever, Kaela corrected. We'll see. She held his gaze for one more moment. Saw the pain there, the regret, the desperate hope that maybe someday she'd forgive him. She wouldn't. She shifted and vanished into the burning forest like smoke, leaving blood and bodies behind. The wolves stood in silence, watching her go. Finally, Marcus turned to Darian, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. You just let our biggest threat walk away. No, Darian said, still staring at the place where Kaela had disappeared. I just let the only thing that matters walk away. Again. He shifted and headed back toward the kingdom, leaving his beta and his hunters to put out the fires and count the dead and wonder what the hell just happened to their king. 3 miles away, Kaela found Sarah hiding in the hollow of a massive oak tree, exactly where she was supposed to be. Are you okay? The girl asked, her eyes wide as she took in the blood covering Kayla's human form. Kaela nodded, catching her breath. Not my blood. What happened? We're leaving, now. This territory isn't safe anymore. They know where we are. Where will we go? Kaela looked toward the distant mountains, their peaks barely visible in the pre-dawn darkness. Beyond those mountains were other territories, wild lands where the northern reaches authority didn't extend, places where she and Sarah could disappear. Somewhere they can't follow, she said. And then what? Then what indeed? Kaela didn't have an answer. All she knew was that Darian's words had shaken something loose inside her, made her realize that no matter how far she ran, no matter how strong she became, she couldn't escape what she was, what they were. The bond might be broken, but the connection remained, the knowledge of each other, the pull. But she could choose what came next, and right now she chose survival. She chose strength. She chose to keep moving forward into the unknown rather than back into a past that had only ever brought pain. Come on, she said to Sarah. We need to move before they change their minds about letting me go. They disappeared into the darkness, leaving the burning forest and the broken Alpha King behind. But Kaela couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over, that despite everything, the rejection, the exile, the violence, this was only the beginning. Because Darian had looked at her with those haunted golden eyes and said he'd made a mistake. And part of her, the part she refused to acknowledge, the part she'd buried deep, wanted desperately to believe him. But belief was dangerous, trust was deadly. So she ran, and tried not to look back. The mountains were worse than the frontier. Kaela and Sarah had been traveling for 6 days, moving deeper into the wild lands where even the Northern Reaches patrols refused to go. The terrain was brutal, sheer cliffs, narrow passes barely wide enough for a single person, rivers swollen with snowmelt that could sweep you away in seconds. But it was the cold that was killing them. Sarah's lips had turned blue 2 days ago. Her teeth chattered constantly, even when they huddled together at night for warmth. Kaela's beast form generated enough heat to keep them both from freezing, but she couldn't stay shifted indefinitely. The transformation burned energy, and food was scarce this high up. "How much farther?" Sarah asked, her voice barely audible over the wind howling through the pass. "I don't know," Kaela admitted. She was carrying most of their supplies, her beast form's strength allowing her to bear weight that would have crushed Sarah. "Until we find somewhere defensible, somewhere they won't follow." "What if there is nowhere like that?" Kaela didn't answer because she'd been asking herself the same question. They rounded a bend in the narrow mountain path and Sarah gasped. Spread out below them was a valley, small, hidden between 3 peaks, with a frozen lake at its center and what looked like caves dotting the cliff faces. But what caught Kaela's attention was the smoke. Multiple campfires, at least a dozen, maybe more. People. "Is that—" Sarah started. "Quiet," Kaela said sharply. She shifted to full beast form, her senses expanding. The wind carried scents to her, unwashed bodies, cooked meat, leather and steel and blood. Lots of blood. And underneath it all, something else. Something that made her hackles rise. Wolves. But not pack wolves. These smelled different. Wild. Feral. Wrong. "We need to go around," Kaela said, already backing away. Too late. A howl split the air, echoing off the mountains. Then another, and another. They'd been spotted. "Run," Kaela said. Sarah didn't argue. She turned and ran back the way they'd come, her boots slipping on ice, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Kaela stayed in beast form, positioning herself between Sarah and whatever was coming. She could hear them now, paws on stone, growing closer. At least 6, maybe 8. The first wolf came around the bend at a dead sprint. It was massive, even bigger than Kaela's beast form, with matted fur and scars covering its body. Its eyes were wrong, not the intelligent gold of pack wolves, but a milky white that spoke of madness or disease. It lunged without warning, without the tactical assessment a sane wolf would make. Kaela met it head on. They collided with a sound like thunder, teeth and claws tearing. The wolf was strong but sloppy, fighting like something that had forgotten strategy and remembered only rage. She tore its throat out in 3 seconds. The others arrived before the first one stopped twitching. 7 of them, all wrong in the same way. Too big, too aggressive, moving with a coordination that suggested a pack but without the discipline. Rogues. Wolves who'd been exiled or had abandoned their packs, driven mad by isolation and the constant need to suppress their wolves without a pack bond to stabilize them. They were rare in the frontier because most died quickly. But here in the mountains, isolated and desperate, they'd apparently formed their own twisted version of a pack. And they looked hungry. Kaela roared a warning, placing herself between the rogues and the path where Sarah had fled. They attacked as one. The fight was chaos, claws and teeth and blood on ice. Kaela was faster, smarter, but there were 7 of them, and they fought without fear or self-preservation. One of them got past her guard and raked claws across her ribs. Another clamped jaws on her hind leg, trying to drag her down. She killed 3 before the rest realized they were outmatched. The remaining 4 scattered, disappearing back into the mountain passes with yelps of pain and fear. Kaela stood panting, blood dripping from a dozen wounds, her beast form trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. "Kaela!" She turned to find Sarah running back toward her, her face pale with terror. "You're hurt," Sarah said, her hands hovering over the worst of the wounds, the deep gouges on Kaela's ribs. Kaela shifted back to human and immediately regretted it. The cold hit like a hammer, and the wounds hurt twice as bad without the beast form's natural pain suppression. "We need to keep moving," she said through gritted teeth. "More will come." "You can barely walk." "I'll heal. I always do." But even as she said it, she stumbled, lost too much blood, too cold, too tired. Sarah caught her, the thin girl somehow keeping Kaela upright through sheer determination. "There," she said, pointing to an outcropping of rock 20 yards away. "We can shelter there. Get you warm." Kaela wanted to argue, but her legs wouldn't cooperate. She let Sarah guide her to the shelter, a shallow cave barely deep enough to protect them from the wind, but better than nothing. Sarah built a fire using the flint and steel Kaela had taught her to use. The flames were small but warm, and Kaela huddled close to them, shivering violently. "You saved me," Sarah said quietly, tearing strips from her own shirt to bandage the worst of Kaela's wounds. "Again. Not saving, surviving." Same thing sometimes. Kaela closed her eyes, focusing on staying conscious. The wounds were already starting to heal, one benefit of whatever she was, but it would take time. Time they might not have. "Sarah," she said, "if more come, if I can't fight, you run. You understand? Don't try to help me, just run." "I'm not leaving you." "You will if I tell you to." Sarah tied off the last bandage, her hands shaking. "You found me in your cave. You could have killed me, should have probably, but you didn't. You taught me, kept me alive. So no, I'm not leaving you, not ever." Kaela wanted to argue, but exhaustion dragged her down into darkness. She woke to voices. Male voices, speaking in the rough dialect of the mountain clans. Kayla's eyes snapped open. The fire had burned down to embers. Sarah was pressed against the back wall of the cave, her makeshift knife, a sharpened piece of bone, gripped in both hands. And standing at the cave entrance were 3 men, not wolves, humans. Or at least, they didn't smell like wolves. The leader was tall, maybe 40, with a beard down to his chest and scars that suggested a violent life. He held a crude spear, the tip blackened by fire and probably poison. "Well," he said in heavily accented Common, "what do we have here?" Kaela tried to shift, but her body refused. Too weak, too damaged. "2 little girls," one of the others said, grinning to show missing teeth. "Lost in the mountains, that's unlucky." "Or lucky," the third one said, depending on perspective. The leader's eyes were on Kaela, studying her with an expression she knew too well. Predatory, calculating. "You killed some of the feral pack, saw the bodies down the pass. That's impressive for someone so small." "Touch her, and I'll kill you," Sarah said, her voice shaking but determined. The men laughed. "The pup has teeth," the leader said. "I like that." He took a step into the cave. "We're not here to hurt you. We're here to make an offer." "Not interested," Kaela managed to say. Her voice came out rough and weak. "You haven't heard the offer yet." The leader crouched down, staying out of striking distance, but close enough to talk. "My name is Roran. I lead the Shattered Fang clan. We control these mountains. The ferals you killed, they've been a problem for months. You did us a favor. So leave," Kaela said. "In exchange for that favor, I'm offering you protection. Food, shelter, a place in the clan." "We don't want it." "You sure about that?" "You're wounded. The girl's half frozen. You won't survive another night out here." Roran's eyes narrowed. "But you're not just human, are you? I can smell it on you. Wolf blood, but wrong somehow. Different." Kaela said nothing. "The Northern Reach exiled you," Roran continued. "We know. News travels even up here. The wolfless girl who turned into a monster. Who killed their hunters. Who made the Alpha King himself come hunting." He smiled. "You've made powerful enemies. But you could make powerful friends." "What do you want?" Kaela asked. "War is coming. The Eastern Pacts are gathering forces. The Southern Coalition is making alliances. The Northern Reach stands alone, and everyone can smell the blood in the water." Roran leaned forward. "I want to be on the winning side. And I think you might be that side. I'm not interested in your politics. Not even if it means revenge? Not even if it means making Darian Voss pay for what he did to you?" Kayla's hands clenched. Roran saw it and smiled. "Thought so. Here's my offer. You join us. Bring your particular talents to the Shattered Fang. In exchange, we give you an army, resources, everything you need to destroy the Northern Reach. I don't want to destroy them. I want them to leave me alone. They won't. You know they won't. You've seen too much, become too powerful. Darien will either try to capture you or kill you. There's no third option. Roran stood. Think about it. We'll be camped in the valley for 3 more days. After that, we move north to join the Eastern Pack's offensive. Come with us or don't. But if you stay out here alone, you'll die. He turned and left, his men following. Sarah waited until they were gone before rushing to Kaela's side. What do we do? Kaela stared at the cave entrance, her mind racing. I don't know. 2 days later, she made her decision. They couldn't survive the mountains alone. The ferals would find them again. The cold would kill them. And Roran was right about one thing. Darien wouldn't stop. He'd proven that when he led a hunting party to her den. But joining the Shattered Fang didn't mean trusting them. Kaela walked into their camp with Sarah at her side, both of them armed and alert. The clan warriors eyed them with a mixture of curiosity and hostility, but no one moved to stop them. Roran was sitting near the largest fire, sharpening a blade. He looked up as they approached and smiled. Smart choice. I have conditions, Kaela said. Of course you do. The girl stays with me, always. No one touches her, no one gives her orders except me. Agreed. I don't follow your commands. We're allies, not subordinates. Roran's smile faded slightly. That might be a problem. Then we leave. He studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Fine. Allies. But if we're fighting together, I need to know what you can do, what you really are. You want a demonstration? I want to know if you're worth the food we'll be feeding you. Kaela looked around the camp, at the hardened warriors, the weapons, the evidence of violence and survival. These people lived by strength, just like the Northern Reach. Fine. She'd show them strength. Pick your best fighter, she said. I'll face them. No weapons, no killing. Roran's grin returned. You sure about that? Pick. He stood and called out a name. Kael. A man stood from across the camp. He was enormous, at least 6.5 feet tall, built like a bear, with arms thick as tree trunks. Scars covered his face and chest. He was missing 3 fingers on his left hand. Kael's never lost a fight, Roran said conversationally. He once killed a mountain lion with his bare hands. Good, Kaela said. She handed her knife to Sarah. Don't interfere no matter what happens. Sarah's eyes were wide with fear. Kaela, trust me. The camp formed a circle, warriors gathering to watch. Kael stepped into the center, cracking his knuckles. Try not to break her too badly, Roran called out. We might need her later. Kael grunted and charged. Kaela didn't shift. She wanted them to see what she could do as human, to understand that the beast form wasn't her only weapon. She waited until Kael was almost on her, then moved. The Northern Reach wolves had taught her to fight dirty. Sarah had given her someone to protect. But the mountains had taught her to be ruthless. She slipped inside Kael's guard, too fast for his bulk to adjust, and drove her fist into his solar plexus with every ounce of strength she had. The enhanced strength that came from whatever she was made the blow devastating. Kael's eyes bulged, his breath whooshing out. Before he could recover, she swept his legs and drove him face first into the frozen ground. The fight lasted less than 10 seconds. Kael lay gasping, trying to figure out what had happened. The camp was silent. Kaela stood over him, not even breathing hard. That's human form, she said to Roran. Want to see what else I can do? Roran's expression had shifted from amused to calculating. No, I think I've seen enough. He walked into the circle and extended his hand. Welcome to the Shattered Fang, Kaela Thorn. She shook it and tried to ignore the feeling that she'd just made a deal with something worse than the pack that had exiled her. Shocked. 3 weeks later, she stood on a ridge overlooking the Northern Reach's capital. The Shattered Fang had joined with 3 other clans and part of the Eastern Pack's forces. Almost 300 warriors, all moving toward the kingdom with one purpose: conquest. The Northern Reach was vulnerable. Darien had sent too many soldiers hunting Kaela, had weakened his borders, had made enemies of potential allies. The Eastern Packs had seen the opportunity and struck, and Kaela was riding at the front of the invasion force. Sarah stood beside her, looking nervous. Are you sure about this? No, Kaela admitted, but it's too late to turn back now. The girl had grown over the past month. Taller, stronger, more confident. She could fight now, could track, could survive on her own if she had to. But she stayed with Kaela by choice. "What happens when we get inside?" Sarah asked. "We find leverage. Something to end this war quickly before more people die." "You mean we find Darien?" Kaela didn't answer. Roran approached, his face grim. "Scouts report the main gate is heavily defended, but there's a weakness on the eastern wall, old damage from a fire last year that was never properly repaired. We hit there, we can breach the city." "How many will die in the breach?" Kaela asked. "Does it matter? This is war." "It matters to me." Roran studied her. "You're still soft, still thinking like Pack. Out here, mercy gets you killed. And cruelty makes you no better than what you're fighting." "Pretty words. Let's see if they keep you alive." He walked away, shouting orders. Kaela watched the city below, her stomach twisting. Somewhere down there, Darien was preparing his defenses. Marcus was organizing soldiers, Vera was calculating odds, and she was about to help destroy it all. "We don't have to do this," Sarah said quietly. "We could leave. Run. Find somewhere else." "There is nowhere else. You know that." Kaela turned to her. "When the fighting starts, you stay back. You understand? You don't join the battle. But promise me." Sarah's jaw set stubbornly. "Only if you promise to come back." "I can't promise that. Then I can't promise to stay back." Kaela wanted to argue, but the attack horn sounded across the valley. The war had begun. The breach happened faster than Kaela expected. The shattered Fang warriors hit the eastern wall with brutal efficiency. Grappling hooks, siege ladders, and sheer ferocity overwhelmed the defenders. Within an hour, they were inside the city. The fighting was chaos. Kaela moved through it in beast form, trying to minimize casualties while knowing it was impossible. Warriors on both sides fell. Blood ran in the streets. Buildings burned. She'd caused this. Her presence, her power, had given the Eastern Coalition the courage to attack. "Kaela!" Roran's voice cut through the noise. "The palace! That's where Darien will make his stand." She didn't want to go, didn't want to face him again, but she moved toward the palace anyway, because not going would change nothing. The palace courtyard was a killing ground. Northern Reach soldiers had formed a defensive line, shields locked, spears bristling. Behind them, Marcus Crane stood in wolf form, directing the defense. And on the palace steps, in human form but radiating alpha power, was Darien. He saw her immediately. Their eyes locked across the battlefield, and everything else faded away. "Kaela!" he shouted. "Call them off. This doesn't have to happen." "It's already happening," she shouted back. "You made it happen when you exiled me, when you rejected what we were." I know I did, but this—" He gestured at the carnage around them. "This isn't the answer." "Then what is? Come inside, talk to me, let me—" A spear flew past Darien's head, missing by inches. The shattered Fang warriors were advancing. Marcus shifted to human form. "Your Majesty, get inside, we'll hold them." "No!" Darien's voice carried the weight of Alpha Command. "Stand down! All of you, stand down!" His soldiers looked at him like he'd gone mad. "That's an order!" Darien roared. "Lower your weapons!" Slowly, reluctantly, the Northern Reach soldiers lowered their spears. Roran laughed from behind Kaela. "Fool! He just gave us the city!" "No," Kaela said. She stepped forward between the two armies, shifting to human form. "Both sides stand down. Now." "You don't command me," Roran said. "I'm not commanding, I'm asking. This war ends here, or I walk away and you lose your advantage." Roran's eyes narrowed. "You're bluffing." "Try me." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Darien did something that shocked everyone. He walked down the palace steps, alone and unarmed, until he stood in front of Kaela. "You want to talk?" Kaela asked. "Then talk." "Not here, inside, just us." "It's a trap," Roran called out. "If I wanted to trap her," Darien said, his eyes never leaving Kaela's, "I would have done it in the frontier. I'm offering peace, a chance to end this without more death. And if I refuse, then we all die here, because I won't surrender my city, and you won't stop until it falls. But maybe we can find another way." Kaela stared at him, at the man who'd broken her, who'd come for her in the mountains, who was now offering her an impossible choice. Trust him again. or watch thousands die. 1 hour, she said. We talk for 1 hour. Then I decide. Done. Marcus started forward. Your Majesty. Stand down, Marcus. That's final. Kaela turned to find Sarah in the crowd, her face pale but determined. If I'm not back in 1 hour, you run. You find somewhere safe, and you forget about me. Kaela, please. Sarah nodded, tears in her eyes. Kaela followed Darian into the palace, leaving two armies staring at each other across a blood-soaked courtyard. Behind her, she heard Roran curse, but he didn't order an attack. Not yet. The throne room was exactly as she remembered it. Stone pillars, vaulted ceiling, the throne carved from black stone and bone. The place where he'd destroyed her. I had them clean the blood, Darian said quietly, closing the door behind them. From where you fell. I couldn't stand looking at it. How considerate. Kaela, you said you wanted to talk, so talk. Darian moved to the throne but didn't sit. I spent the last 2 months trying to figure out how to fix what I broke. Sent envoys to neighboring pacts, asked healers if there was a way to restore a severed bond. There isn't. It's gone. Permanent. I know. But I realized something. The bond was never the real problem. The problem was me. My fear. My weakness. He turned to face her. You were right. I chose the throne over you, and it was the worst decision I've ever made. That doesn't change anything. No. But maybe this does. He pulled something from his pocket, a small object wrapped in cloth. My father gave this to me when he died. Said it was the most important thing an Alpha King could have. He unwrapped it. It was a ring. Simple silver band with no decoration. He said it was humility. The knowledge that even kings are just people. That power means nothing without someone to share it with. Darian held the ring out. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to rule beside me, not as a subordinate, not as a pretty figurehead, but as an equal, a partner. Kaela stared at the ring. You want me to marry you? I want you to save this kingdom, because I can't do it alone. The Eastern Pacts are circling. The Southern Coalition is preparing to strike, and His voice broke. I'm falling apart without you. So this is political. You need my power. No, I need you. The power is just a bonus. He took a step closer. I know I don't deserve this, don't deserve you. But these people, our people, they don't deserve to die because I was too proud and too scared to see what was right in front of me. Kaela's hands were shaking. You rejected me, humiliated me, threw me away. I did. And I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it if you let me. The bond is broken. We'll never have that again. Then we build something new, something stronger, not fate or magic, but choice. Every day choosing each other. He held out the ring again. Choose me, Kaela. Choose us. Choose this. She looked at the ring, then at him, then at the throne room where he'd destroyed her. And she realized something. She didn't want revenge. She wanted what she'd always wanted, to belong somewhere, to matter to someone, to be seen as more than broken or wrong or other. If I do this, she said slowly, everything changes. No more exile. No more hiding what I am. I stand beside you as what I am, and everyone accepts it or they leave. Done. And Sarah, she comes with me. She's under my protection, always. Of course. And you tell me the truth, right now. Why did you really reject me? Darian's face crumpled. Because I loved you. From the moment the bond snapped into place, I loved you with an intensity that terrified me. And I knew that if I accepted it, if I let myself love you completely, I would lose myself, would become someone who would burn the world for you. And I thought that made me weak. And now? Now I know that loving you is the only thing that makes me strong. Kaela took the ring. Darian's breath caught. She held it up to the light, watching it gleam. This doesn't fix what you did. I know. And I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for everyone out there who's going to die if this war continues. I know. But Darian, she met his eyes. If you ever make me feel like I'm not enough again, I will tear this kingdom apart brick by brick, starting with you. I believe you. He smiled, and it was broken and hopeful at the same time. Is that a yes? Kaela slipped the ring onto her finger. Then she punched him in the face. Darian went down hard, blood streaming from his nose. He looked up at her in shock. That's for rejecting me, she said. Then she held out her hand and helped him up. Now let's go stop a war. They walked out of the throne room together, and for the first time since the bond broke, Kaela felt something like hope. Hooray! The courtyard was still frozen in standoff when they emerged. Both armies turned to look. Darian raised his voice, projecting Alpha Command across the space. The war is over. By my authority as Alpha King and with the agreement of Kaela Thorn, I declare an immediate ceasefire. You don't speak for us, Roran shouted. No, Kaela said, stepping forward. But I do. Stand down, Roran. The Shattered Fangs alliance with the Eastern Pax is over. We're going home. You're betraying us. After everything, I'm stopping a slaughter. There's a difference. Roran's hand went to his weapon. You think you can just walk away? I think if you try to stop me, I'll kill you and everyone stupid enough to stand with you. And then the Eastern Pax will be facing the combined might of the Northern Reach and whatever I am. Your call. Roran looked at her, at Darian, at the ring on her finger. Then he spat on the ground and turned away. Shattered Fang, we're leaving. His warriors followed, but the looks they gave Kaela promised this wasn't over. Sarah ran to Kayla's side, throwing her arms around her. You came back. I promised I would. Marcus approached, his face carefully neutral. Your Majesty, should I prepare quarters for our guest? No, Darian said. Prepare the Queen's chambers and summon the council. We have a wedding to plan. The murmurs that rippled through the crowd were part shock, part outrage, and part something that might have been hope. Kaela looked at Darian, at the kingdom spread out around them, at the impossible choice she'd just made. I hope you know what you're doing, she said quietly. I don't, he admitted, but I know I'm doing it with you, and that's enough. It would have to be, because at the edge of the courtyard, barely visible in the shadows, Lissa Voss watched with eyes full of hatred, and Kaela knew, with absolute certainty, that the real battle was just beginning. Lissa Voss disappeared before dawn. Marcus found her chambers empty, the window open to the cold morning air, her belongings gone except for a single item deliberately left behind. A silver bracelet Darian had given her when she was 12. It sat on her pillow like an accusation. No note, no explanation, just the lingering smell of her perfume and the unmistakable scent of betrayal. She's gone to the Eastern Pax, Marcus said, standing in the council chamber 3 hours later. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his jaw was clenched so tight Kaela could hear his teeth grinding. She'll tell them everything, our defenses, our numbers, our weaknesses, every secret she knows, and she knows all of them. Let her, Kaela said from her seat at the council table. It still felt strange, sitting here where the pack elders gathered, where decisions that affected thousands of lives were made over maps and arguments. She could feel the weight of their stares, some curious, some hostile, all uncertain. She'll tell them I'm here, that I'm with Darian. That changes everything. Does it? Vera Blackwood's voice was sharp as ever, though her gaze on Kaela had shifted from outright hostility to something more cautious, more calculating. Or does it make us look desperate? A king who rejected his mate in front of the entire court, then crawled back when he needed her power? That's not strength. That's weakness wrapped in pretty words. It makes us look unified, Darian said firmly from his seat at the head of the table. Which we are. Or at least, which we're going to be. Are we? Vera leaned forward, her silver braid falling over her shoulder. Half the pack is calling her an abomination. The other half thinks you've gone mad with grief or lust or both. And your sister, your own blood, just defected to our enemies. Forgive me, Your Majesty, if I question our so-called unity. Kaela met Vera's eyes across the table. The old woman didn't flinch. What do you want me to do, Vera? Leave? Walk away? Would that make you feel better? Make you feel safe? What I want, Vera said slowly, choosing each word like a weapon, is to understand what you are. Because everything I know about wolves, everything I've learned in 60 years of surviving in this brutal kingdom, says you shouldn't exist. And things that shouldn't exist tend to break the rules we rely on to stay alive. I don't know what I am, Kaela admitted. The honesty felt dangerous, but she was tired of lying. But I know what I'm not. I'm not your enemy.
Unless you make me one. Then I'll be the worst enemy you've ever had." The room went very quiet. Finally, Marcus spoke, his voice carefully neutral. "The Eastern Pacts will attack within the week. Maybe sooner now that Lissa's given them intelligence. We need to be ready. We need to fortify the weak points in our defenses and recall the border patrols."
"We need allies," Darian corrected. "The Southern Coalition has stayed neutral so far. If we can convince them to side with us, show them that we're strong enough to win—" "They won't," Vera interrupted flatly. "They're waiting to see who wins so they can align with the victor and share in the spoils. Standard coalition strategy. They've done it for 3 generations. Why would they change now?" "Then we make sure we win first," Kaela said. "Show them we're worth backing. Show them we're the side that doesn't lose." "Against an army twice our size?" Marcus shook his head. "Against professional soldiers who've been training for this for months? The math doesn't work. We can defend the walls for maybe 2 weeks if we're lucky. Then we starve or they break through. Either way, we lose." "The math doesn't account for me," Kaela said quietly. Everyone turned to stare at her. She stood, moving to the large map spread across the table. It showed the northern reach and the surrounding territories, with markers indicating troop movements and strategic positions. The Eastern Pacts fight like traditional wolves. Hierarchies, formations, alpha commands. They rely on structure and discipline and the chain of command. But I don't. I'm not bound by pack rules or wolf instincts. I can move through their lines like smoke, cause chaos, break their formations before the real fighting even starts. "You're talking about guerrilla tactics," Marcus said, his tone shifting from skeptical to interested. "Hit and run, asymmetric warfare." "I'm talking about fear," Kaela corrected, "making them so terrified of what's out there in the dark that they hesitate. Break formation, start making mistakes. Start seeing monsters in every shadow." She traced a line on the map with her finger. "Their supply lines run through the northern pass here, 3 days' march from our position. Those wagons carry food, weapons, medicine, everything an army needs to sustain a prolonged siege. If those supplies don't arrive, they can't maintain their offensive. They'll have to fall back or risk starvation." "You want to raid their supplies?" Vera asked, her eyebrows rising. "Alone? That's not courage, girl. That's suicide." "Not alone. I'll take volunteers, small group, fast and quiet. We hit them at night when they're not expecting it, burn what we can't carry, and disappear before reinforcements arrive." "It's still suicide," Marcus said flatly. "Even with volunteers. You're talking about attacking a fortified supply camp with maybe a dozen soldiers against 200. The numbers don't matter if they're too scared to fight properly," Kaela interrupted. "You're thinking like a wolf. I'm not a wolf. Neither is what I become." Darian studied the map, his jaw working. She could see him calculating, weighing risks against potential gains. "How many volunteers would you need?" 10, maybe 15. People who can move fast and stay quiet, and don't mind getting their hands dirty. People who won't panic when things go wrong." "I'll go," Sarah said from the doorway. Everyone's head snapped toward her. The girl stood there in borrowed armor that was clearly too big for her, the leather chest piece hanging loose, the shoulder guard sliding down her arms. But her chin was raised defiantly, and her hand rested on the bone knife at her belt. "Absolutely not," Kaela said, her voice harder than she intended. "You taught me to fight, taught me to track, to survive, to kill when I have to. Now let me use those skills. You're 13 years old, 14 next week, and I've killed before." Sarah's voice was steady, though Kaela could smell the fear underneath. "Those rogues in the mountains. I put a knife in one of them while you were fighting the others, stabbed him in the kidney and twisted. So don't treat me like I'm some helpless child who needs protecting." Kaela stared at her, emotions warring in her chest. Pride at what Sarah had become. Fear at what she might lose. Something that felt dangerously like the love a mother might feel for a daughter, though Kaela had no experience with such things. "No," she said finally, her voice leaving no room for argument. "You stay here where it's safe, where I can protect you." "Nowhere's safe," Sarah shot back. "You taught me that too. You taught me that the world is brutal and unfair, and that the only person you can count on is yourself. So let me prove I learned the lesson." "The girl makes a point," Vera said, her tone almost approving. "And we need everyone who can fight. We can't afford to leave capable hands idle just because they're young." She's not going, Kaela said, her voice hardening into a tone that allowed no argument, the kind of voice that made even Marcus step back. That's final. Non-negotiable. Sarah's face flushed with anger and hurt. You're being a hypocrite. When you were my age, when I was your age, I was being beaten and starved and told I was worthless every single day. I don't want that for you. I want you safe. Here. Alive. Kaela's voice cracked slightly. Please. Sarah stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out, her footsteps echoing too loudly in the stone corridor. Marcus cleared his throat, breaking the awkward silence. I'll put together a list of volunteers, people I trust, people who've survived bad situations before. When do you want to leave? Tonight. As soon as it's dark, before Lissa's intelligence reaches them and they reinforce the supply lines. That's not enough time to plan properly. It's all the time we have. Every hour we wait is an hour closer to them attacking. We move now, or we don't move at all. Darian stood. I'm going with you. No, Kaela said immediately. Yes. You're the Alpha King. You can't just run off into enemy territory. I'm also your partner, your mate. And I'm not sending you into danger alone while I sit here safe behind walls, drinking wine, and pretending to be brave. His golden eyes met hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being stupid and reckless, and that his death would doom the kingdom to chaos and civil war. But she also understood, because she would have felt the same way if their positions were reversed. Fine, she said through gritted teeth, but you follow my lead out there. No alpha commands, no pulling rank, no trying to protect me. In the field, I'm in charge. Agreed? Agreed. Vera made a disgusted sound. You're both insane. Absolutely insane. Marcus, make the arrangements for this suicide mission, and someone find that girl before she does something monumentally stupid. But by the time guards searched the palace top to bottom, checking every chamber and closet and hidden corner, Sarah was already gone. She'd slipped out through the same window Lissa had used, taking only her knife and the traveling cloak Kaela had given her, and the skills she'd learned over months of brutal training, heading north toward the Eastern Pax territory, toward exactly the kind of danger Kaela had desperately tried to protect her from. When they told Kaela, she put her fist through a stone wall hard enough to crack the mortar. We'll find her, Darian said, though his voice betrayed his doubt. His hand hovered near her shoulder but didn't quite touch. We'll bring her back safe. She's going to get herself killed, Kaela said, staring at her bleeding knuckles. The bones were already knitting back together, the torn skin regenerating. She's going to die because she wanted to prove herself to me, because I made her think that's what matters. Or she's going to survive because you taught her how. Have some faith. Faith? Kaela laughed bitterly. Faith got me rejected and thrown away like garbage. Faith got me beaten and exiled. I'm done with Faith. Then have faith in her. You said she was strong, said she killed a rogue in the mountains. So trust that strength. Trust what you taught her. Kaela closed her eyes, fighting down the rage and fear that threatened to overwhelm her. If we find her alive, I'm locking her in a cell until this war is over. I don't care if she hates me for it. If we find her alive, you can do whatever you want. I'll help you carry her to the cell if necessary. They left at midnight with 12 volunteers, all experienced scouts, all people who'd survived impossible situations before, all willing to follow a monster into the dark because their king asked them to. Marcus had wanted to come, but Darian ordered him to stay and coordinate the kingdom's defenses. Someone had to hold things together if they didn't come back. The journey north was brutal. They moved fast, sleeping in shifts of 2 hours, eating dried meat while they walked. Kaela ranged ahead in beast form, her enhanced senses scanning for patrols and ambushes or any sign of Sarah. On the second day, they found tracks, small boots, human-sized but light, the stride length suggesting someone young but moving with purpose. The tracks stayed off the main paths, cutting through dense underbrush and rocky terrain that would slow pursuers. Sarah, Kaela breathed, shifting back to human to examine the tracks more closely. She's 2 days ahead of us, one of the scouts said, a grizzled woman named Mira who'd been tracking prey and people for 30 years, moving fast, staying smart, avoiding the obvious routes. She learned well, Darian said quietly, crouching beside Kaela. Too well? Kaela thought bitterly. She'd taught Sarah everything she knew about disappearing, about moving like a ghost, about surviving alone in hostile territory. Now those lessons might get her killed. They pushed harder, barely stopping to rest. The volunteers didn't complain, though Kaela could see the exhaustion in their faces. By the third night, they were close to the Eastern Pack's supply camp, close enough to smell the campfires and hear the distant sounds of soldiers talking and laughing. Kaela called a halt in a dense thicket half a mile from the camp. We scout first, get a sense of their numbers, their layout, their guard rotations. Then we plan the actual attack.
I'll go, Darian said immediately. No, you're too recognizable. They'll smell alpha on you from 100 yards away, and then we lose any chance of surprise. She looked at the scouts. Anders, Mira, you're with me. The rest of you stay here and stay quiet. If we're not back by dawn, assume we're dead and get back to the kingdom as fast as you can.
Kaela, Darian started. She kissed him before he could finish the sentence, hard and fast and desperate, pouring all the fear and love and uncertainty into it. I'll come back, I promise. But if something goes wrong, you make sure Sarah gets home safe. That's the priority. You're the priority. No, she is. Promise me. I promise. Kaela shifted and disappeared into the darkness with Anders and Mira trailing silently behind her. The supply camp was bigger than she'd expected and better defended. Maybe 200 soldiers in total, all armed and alert, guarding dozens of wagons filled with food, weapons, medical supplies, and ammunition. Tents were arranged in orderly rows. Sentries walked regular patrols. Fires burned in carefully managed pits. This wasn't a careless camp. This was a military operation run by people who knew what they were doing. Kaela crept closer, her beast form blending with the shadows between trees. Anders and Mira moved like ghosts behind her, their decades of experience showing in every careful step. She was mapping the guard rotations, counting sentries, identifying weak points in their perimeter when she smelled it. Blood, fresh blood, human blood, and underneath the copper smell, something else. A scent she knew as well as her own. Sarah. Kaela's heart stopped, then started again, pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. She followed the scent with single-minded focus, moving deeper into the camp, taking insane risks because nothing mattered except finding Sarah. The scent led to a tent near the center of the camp, larger than the others. Voices drifted from inside, male voices, rough and cruel, laughing about something. Little Spy thought she could sneak past the sentries. Pretty thing. Shame we have to kill her. Who says we have to do it quickly? Commander said make an example. Didn't say we couldn't have some fun first. True. And it's been a long campaign. We've earned a little entertainment. More laughter. Kaela didn't remember making the decision to attack. One moment she was outside the tent listening, the next she was inside, her jaws closing around the first soldier's throat with enough force to crush his windpipe. She tore it out before his brain registered what was happening. The second soldier screamed and reached for his weapon. She killed him before his hand touched the hilt, her claws tearing through his chest like paper. The third managed to draw his sword and actually swing it at her. She caught the blade with one massive paw, barely feeling the cut, and tore his arm off at the shoulder. He fell, screaming, and she ended it with a single bite. When the blood cleared from her vision and her heartbeat slowed from its frantic pace, Sarah was huddled in the corner, her hands bound behind her back, her face bruised and swollen, her lips split and bleeding, her clothes torn. But her eyes were fierce and angry and very much alive. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered through her damaged lip. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to help, and I thought I could sneak in, and I was stupid, and—" Later, Kaela said, shifting to human. She was naked and covered in blood, but that didn't matter. Nothing mattered, except getting Sarah out. "Can you walk?" "Yes." "Then we run. Right now." Alarms were already sounding across the camp, soldiers pouring from tents, weapons drawn, voices shouting orders. The camp was like a kicked anthill, chaos spreading in every direction. Anders and Mira appeared at the tent entrance, both shifted to wolf form, both ready to fight. Kaela grabbed Sarah's bound hands and tore the ropes apart with her enhanced strength. Then she grabbed the girl's hand and ran. The camp exploded into full combat behind them. Wolves, shifting, giving chase. Officers screaming orders, the sound of pursuit growing louder with every second. They weren't going to make it. Too many soldiers, too much open ground between them and the forest. Too little time. Then Darian appeared from the tree line with the rest of the volunteers, already shifted, already attacking. The two groups of wolves collided with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains, teeth and claws and blood in the moonlight, snarls and screams, and the wet sound of flesh tearing. Kaela shifted mid-run, her beast form exploding from her human skin, and joined the fight. She positioned herself between Sarah and the pursuing soldiers, her body a living shield. They were outnumbered 3-1 at least. But Kaela fought like something born from nightmares and ancient curses, her beast form tearing through enemy wolves with a savagery that made even Darian's volunteers hesitate in shock. She killed 7 soldiers in less than 2 minutes. Not clean kills, not honorable kills, brutal, terrifying kills that left bodies mangled beyond recognition. The Eastern Pack soldiers began to realize they weren't fighting wolves, or even a particularly large wolf. They were fighting something that shouldn't exist, something that moved wrong, hit harder than anything their size should hit, recovered from wounds that should have been fatal, something that their wolf instincts screamed at them to run from. The Eastern Wolves' formation crumbled. Some tried to run. Others stood frozen in terror, their training forgotten in the face of primal fear. Kaela gave the signal, a howl that meant retreat, and their small group melted back into the forest like smoke. They ran for over an hour before Darian finally called a halt in a ravine deep enough to hide them. Everyone was gasping, bleeding, barely able to stand. "The supplies," Anders said between ragged breaths. "We didn't destroy the supplies. The mission—" "Yes, we did," Darian said. He was grinning despite the blood dripping from a dozen wounds across his body. "Look." Behind them, visible even through the dense forest, the sky lit up orange and red. The supply camp was burning. "I set fires before joining the fight," Darian explained, his grin widening. "Oil on the wagon wheels, sparks from the cooking fires, flaming arrows into the supply tents. Honestly didn't think it would actually work that well." Kaela stared at him, covered in blood and ash, grinning like a madman. "You were supposed to stay back and wait. You were supposed to scout, not stage a one-woman massacre and rescue mission. Looks like we're both terrible at following plans." She wanted to be angry, should have been furious that he'd risked himself. Instead, she kissed him again, tasting blood and smoke and something that might have been joy or relief, or just the desperate gratitude of being alive. When they pulled apart, Sarah was watching them with a complicated expression. Part embarrassment, part longing, part something else Kaela couldn't quite identify. "I'm sorry," Sarah said again, her voice small. "I know I screwed up. I wanted to prove I could help. That I wasn't just dead weight you had to protect." "You almost died," Kaela said, pulling her into a fierce hug despite the blood and dirt covering them both. "You almost died, and I would have burned that entire camp to ash to get to you." "I know, and I'm sorry, but you came for me." Sarah's voice cracked. "No one's ever come for me before. My father sold me. The pack ignored me. But you came." "I'll always come for you," Kaela said fiercely into her hair. "You understand? Always. You're mine now. Mine to protect. But if you ever pull something like this again, I swear I will lock you in a cell and throw away the key. I'm not joking." "Okay," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "I promise, no more running off." "Good. Now let's go home before I collapse." They made it back to the kingdom 3 days later, exhausted and wounded and moving like the walking dead, but victorious. The news of the supply camp's destruction had already spread before they even reached the gates, carried by scouts and traders and people who'd seen the smoke. The Eastern Pack's offensive had stalled completely. Without supplies, their army couldn't advance. Some reports said they were withdrawing, retreating to regroup and resupply. Others said internal fighting had broken out over the failure. And the kingdom celebrated like they'd already won the war. For the first time in months, people had genuine hope instead of just desperate determination. But Kaela knew it wasn't over. Lissa was still out there. The Eastern Packs would regroup eventually. The real battle, the one that would decide everything, was still coming. For now, though, they'd bought time, weeks, maybe even months. Marcus met them at the palace entrance, his face carefully neutral but his eyes showing relief. "Congratulations. You did the impossible. Again." "We got lucky," Kaela said, too tired to stand up straight. "Luck is part of war. So is skill. You had both." He paused, his expression shifting to something more formal. The council wants to see you, both of you, immediately. Can it wait until we're not covered in blood and barely conscious? Darian asked. I'm afraid not. They're insisting. What now? Kaela asked, dread pooling in her stomach. They want to move forward with the wedding, make it official before the Eastern Pacts recover and attack again. Make your union public and binding so there's no question of legitimacy. Kayla's stomach twisted. A wedding in the middle of a war. Especially in the middle of a war, Marcus said. People need something to believe in, need to see their king and queen united and strong, need hope and symbols and reasons to keep fighting. I'm not queen yet. You are if you marry him, and if you don't, Marcus shrugged. The alliance falls apart. People start questioning whether this is real or just political convenience. Divisions form. We lose the unity we just fought for. We need this, Kaela. The kingdom needs it desperately. She looked at Darian. He looked exhausted and hurt and still somehow beautiful in the morning light, his golden eyes steady on hers. 7 days, Vera said, appearing behind Marcus like a ghost. We'll prepare a ceremony, small enough to organize quickly, but public enough to matter. Enough to show unity without leaving us vulnerable to attack during the event. 7 days, Kaela repeated numbly. It felt simultaneously too soon and not soon enough. Unless you've changed your mind? Vera's eyes were sharp, searching. Unless this was all just strategy and you're having second thoughts about binding yourself to this kingdom permanently? No, I haven't changed my mind. Kaela took Darian's hand, their fingers elacing together automatically. 7 days, we'll be ready. The week that followed passed in a blur of preparations and continued skirmishing at the borders. The Eastern Pacts probed their defenses constantly, testing for weaknesses, launching small raids to keep them off balance. Lyssa sent messages, threats, promises of terrible revenge, attempts to sow discord and division. Kaela ignored them all. Sarah trained with the kingdom's soldiers under Marcus's direct supervision, proving herself capable despite her age and the soldiers' initial skepticism. The volunteers who'd gone north with Kaela treated her like a veteran, someone who'd proven herself in battle and earned respect through action rather than talk. And Kaela tried not to think too hard about what marriage meant, what ruling meant, what it would feel like to stand beside Darian and accept the crown of a kingdom that had thrown her away like garbage just months ago. The night before the wedding, she stood on the palace balcony, staring at the city spread below. Lights flickered in windows. People moved through streets, living their lives, unaware or uncaring that their queen-to-be was something that shouldn't exist. Second thoughts? Darian asked, joining her at the railing. 100th thoughts. Maybe 1000th. I stopped counting. We could run. Take Sarah and disappear into the frontier. Build a life away from all this politics and responsibility. Just the three of us. Could we? No, he admitted with a bitter laugh. But it's a nice fantasy, pretending we have choices we don't actually have. They stood in silence for a while, shoulders touching. What happens after? Kaela asked finally. After we win the war, after the Eastern Pacts are defeated and the kingdom is safe. What happens to the monster they made queen? You stop calling yourself a monster, Darian said firmly, and start calling yourself what you actually are, which is extraordinary, powerful, exactly what this kingdom needs to survive. He turned to face her fully. Kaela, I've seen what you can do, not just the fighting or the strength or the terrifying beast form. I've seen you protect Sarah like she's your own daughter, seen you comfort wounded soldiers, seen you make decisions that save lives even when killing would be easier. You're not a monster. You're a queen. Your people don't think so. Half of them still look at me like I'm going to murder them in their sleep. Some don't trust you yet, he acknowledged. But they will. Give them time. Give yourself time. You can't expect them to accept overnight what took you years to accept about yourself. Kaela wanted to believe him, wanted to think that acceptance was possible, that she could be both queen and beast without losing herself or becoming something she hated. But belief was hard after everything that had happened, after years of being told she was worthless and broken and wrong. Still, she'd try. For him, for Sarah, for the impossible future they were trying to build from blood and ashes. For herself. The wedding was at dawn, as was tradition for alpha matings in the Northern Reach. The ceremony took place in the palace courtyard, with the entire court in attendance, Hundreds of wolves in human form, dressed in their finest, and crowds gathered beyond the gates, pressing close to witness history. Kaela wore a dress of deep blue that Sarah had helped her choose, simple but elegant, with silver embroidery along the hem that caught the morning light. Sarah had helped her dress, the girl's fingers careful and precise with the complicated laces. "You look beautiful," Sarah said, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I look terrified." "That too, but mostly beautiful, like a real queen." "I don't feel like a queen. I feel like I'm about to throw up." Sarah laughed. "That's normal, probably. I've never been to a royal wedding before." Darian waited at the altar in formal black, his hair pulled back, his face serious and composed. When Kaela walked toward him down the aisle between rows of watching wolves, his expression softened into something that made her chest physically ache. The ceremony was short by royal standards. Traditional words about unity and strength and the sacred bond between alpha and mate. Words that felt somewhat hollow and ironic given what they'd been through, what they'd done to each other. But when Darian took her hand and spoke his vows, his voice was steady and clear, carrying across the courtyard. "I, Darian Voss, take you, Kaela Thorn, as my mate and equal, to stand beside you in strength and in weakness, to honor what you are without reservation or fear, to build with you a kingdom worthy of your power and your sacrifice. This I swear before witnesses and under the open sky." Then it was her turn. Kaela looked out at the crowd, at Marcus, standing at rigid attention, at Vera, watching with those sharp, calculating eyes, at Sarah, openly crying tears of joy, at the hundreds of faces, some welcoming, some hostile, most uncertain and afraid, at the kingdom that had broken her and now wanted her to save it. She took a deep breath. "I, Kaela Thorn, take you, Darian Voss, as my mate and equal," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite her fear. "To stand beside you even when standing is difficult and painful, to bring my strength to your kingdom without losing who I am in the process, to be both queen and beast, both gentle and fierce, both mercy and justice." She paused, meeting the eyes of the watching crowd. "And to anyone here who thinks I don't belong in this place, who thinks I'm not worthy of this crown, I earned it. Through blood and survival and refusing to die when you wanted me to. So you better get used to seeing me here, because I'm not going anywhere." A shocked silence fell across the courtyard. Then someone in the crowd started clapping, slowly at first, then faster. Then another person joined in. Then the applause spread like wildfire, growing louder and louder until the courtyard rang with it, until the sound echoed off the palace walls. Not everyone was clapping. Kaela could see the ones who stood silent, their faces hard with disapproval and barely concealed disgust. Could smell their hostility even from this distance. But enough people were celebrating, genuinely celebrating, that it felt like victory. Like maybe, possibly, acceptance was real. Marcus stepped forward with a crown, smaller and simpler than Darian's, silver instead of black iron, but a crown nonetheless. A symbol of authority and power. Darian took it carefully and placed it on her head. "The Queen of the Northern Reach," he announced, his voice ringing with pride and something deeper. Kaela Voss. The name sounded strange, foreign, like it belonged to someone else entirely, someone confident and powerful and certain. But as the crowd cheered and Sarah threw her arms around Kayla's waist, sobbing with happiness, and Darian kissed her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. For the first time since the rejection, since the exile, since all of it, Kaela felt like maybe, possibly, against all odds, she might actually belong somewhere. The celebration lasted through the entire day and into the night. Food and drink flowed freely. Music played, people danced and laughed and forgot, for a few precious hours, that war was coming and death waited just beyond their borders. As night fell properly, Kaela stood on the palace steps, watching her new kingdom settle into darkness, punctuated by torches and celebration fires. Darian joined her, slipping an arm around her waist and pulling her close. "How does it feel?" "Strange, surreal, terrifying. Like I'm waiting for someone to realize this is all a huge mistake and take it away." "It's not a mistake. You're exactly where you're supposed to be, where you've always been meant to be. We'll see. Ask me again in a year when..." She stopped mid-sentence. In the distance, at the very edge of the torchlight where shadows gathered thick, a figure stood watching. Too far away to identify features, but close enough to be a deliberate message. Then the figure raised one hand in a mocking salute and disappeared into the darkness. Lissa, still out there, still dangerous, still plotting revenge. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, against all odds and logic and probability, Kaela was queen. Tomorrow, she'd prove she deserved to be. And anyone who stood in her way, sister, enemy, or otherwise, would learn exactly what the broken wolf had become. The attack came 3 days after the wedding, not from the Eastern Pax, as everyone expected, from inside the kingdom itself. Kaela woke to the sound of Sarah screaming. She was moving before her mind fully registered what was happening, shifting mid-leap from the bed, her beast form crashing through the bedroom door in a shower of splintered wood. Sarah's room was chaos. 5 wolves in human form, all wearing the colors of the palace guard, had the girl pinned against the wall. One held a knife to her throat. The others had weapons drawn. "Don't move," the one with the knife said. His name was Garrett, one of the guards who'd dragged Kaela through the streets during her exile. "Or the girl dies." Kaela froze, every muscle in her body screaming to attack, to tear them apart, to protect what was hers. "Smart," Garrett continued. "Now shift back, slowly. No sudden moves." Behind her, she heard Darian burst from their chambers, heard his roar of rage, heard more fighting in the hallway. This wasn't just an attack on Sarah. This was a coordinated assault on the entire royal family. A coup. "Shift back," Garrett repeated, pressing the knife harder against Sarah's throat. A thin line of blood appeared. "Or I open her throat right here." Kaela shifted back to human form, standing naked and vulnerable in the middle of Sarah's room. "Good," Garrett said. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk out of this palace and disappear back into whatever hole you crawled out of. The king will annul the marriage, claim temporary insanity, and things will go back to normal." "And if I refuse?" Kaela asked, her voice deadly calm despite the rage boiling inside her. "Then the girl dies. Then we kill the king. Then we take control of this kingdom and restore proper order, the kind where monsters don't sit on thrones." "You really think you can kill him? Kill us both?" "We don't need to kill you both, just one of you. And judging by how you're looking at this girl, I think I know which one you'd choose." He was right. Kaela would sacrifice herself 1,000 times over before letting Sarah die. But she didn't have to, because in the doorway behind Garrett, moving silent as death, was Darian. He'd circled around through the servants' passages. His eyes met Kaela's for a fraction of a second, and she understood. "You're making a mistake," Kaela said, taking a small step forward, drawing all attention to herself. "You think killing me solves anything? You think the Eastern Pax will just leave you alone? That the Southern Coalition won't see weakness and attack? We'll deal with them the proper way," Garrett said, "through strength and tradition, not by crowning monsters." "Then you've already lost." Darian struck. His hand closed around Garrett's wrist, twisting hard enough to snap bone. The knife clattered to the floor. Before the other guards could react, Kaela shifted and tore into them with a violence that came from pure protective fury. The fight lasted maybe 10 seconds. When it was over, 3 guards were dead. One was unconscious, and Garrett was on his knees, cradling his broken wrist, his face pale with shock and pain. Sarah collapsed into Kaela's arms. She'd shifted back to human, sobbing with fear and relief. "It's okay," Kaela whispered, holding her tight. "You're safe. I've got you." Marcus burst into the room with a dozen loyal soldiers, taking in the carnage. "Your Majesties, are you—" "We're fine," Darian said, his voice hard. "The girl's safe. What's the situation elsewhere?" 15 conspirators total. We've captured or killed most of them, but—" Marcus hesitated. "Vera Blackwood is among them." Kaela's head snapped up. "What?" "She was coordinating from the council chambers. We found messages, plans. She's been organizing this since before the wedding." Of course she has, Kaela thought bitterly. The old wolf had never truly accepted her, had seen her as a threat to the kingdom's traditions, to everything Vera had spent 60 years protecting. "Where is she now?" Darian asked. "Locked in the lower cells, awaiting your judgment." Darian looked at Kaela. "This is your decision. She tried to have you killed." "She tried to have all of us killed," Kaela corrected. She was still holding Sarah, the girl's face pressed against her shoulder. "But you're the king. Royal justice is your domain." You're the queen, and she attacked you specifically. Your judgment carries equal weight to mine." He paused. "What do you want to do with her?" What did she want? Part of her wanted Vera dead, wanted to tear out the old woman's throat for threatening Sarah, for nearly destroying everything they'd built. But another part, the part that had learned hard lessons about mercy and justice, knew that execution would only create a martyr, would give the opposition a symbol to rally around. "I want to talk to her," Kaela said finally. "Alone." The cells beneath the palace were old stone and iron, cold and damp and smelling of fear. Vera sat on a wooden bench in the largest cell, her hands chained, her silver hair disheveled, but her eyes were sharp as ever when Kaela entered. "Come to gloat?" Vera asked. "Come to understand." Kaela pulled up a chair and sat, making sure she was at eye level with the old woman. "Why? Why throw away everything for this? You've served 4 Alpha Kings, survived wars and famines and political upheavals. Why risk it all now?" "Because you're an abomination," Vera said flatly. "Because everything I've worked for my entire life is about preserving what it means to be wolf, about maintaining the traditions and structures that keep us strong. And you?" She shook her head. "You break all of it. You're not wolf. You're not human. You're something that shouldn't exist, and yet Darien put a crown on your head and called you queen. So you tried to have me killed. I tried to save this kingdom from what you'll turn it into. And what's that? Chaos, weakness, a place where the rules don't matter anymore because the queen herself doesn't follow them." Kaela was quiet for a long moment. "You're wrong about me, but you're not entirely wrong about what I represent." Vera's eyebrows rose slightly. "I do break the rules," Kaela continued. "I'm something different, something that challenges everything you've built your life on. And that terrifies you." She leaned forward. "But here's what you don't understand, Vera. The world is changing whether you like it or not. The Eastern Pacts are using new tactics. The Southern Coalition is forming new alliances. Everything you knew, everything you counted on, it's already gone. You just haven't accepted it yet. So your solution is to become a monster? My solution is to become whatever this kingdom needs to survive. Sometimes that's a monster, sometimes it's a queen, sometimes it's both." Kaela stood. "You tried to kill me, Vera. Tried to kill Darien and Sarah. By rights, I should execute you, would be justified, expected even. But you won't," Vera said. It wasn't a question. "No. Because killing you would be easy, and I'm done doing things the easy way." Kaela moved to the cell door. "You're going to live, Vera. You're going to watch me rule, watch this kingdom thrive under someone you called an abomination. And maybe, eventually, you'll understand that being different isn't the same as being wrong." She walked out, leaving Vera sitting in stunned silence. The war came 2 weeks later. The Eastern Pact's full army, nearly 2,000 soldiers, marched on the capital. They'd been reinforced by mercenary clans from the mountains and rogue packs that saw opportunity in the chaos. Leading them was Lissa Voss, wearing armor and carrying a sword, her face set with determination and hatred. Kaela stood on the battlements, watching them approach. Beside her stood Darien, Marcus, and Sarah, all armed, all ready. "That's a lot of wolves," Sarah said quietly. "Yes, it is," Kaela agreed. "Can we win?" "I don't know, but we're going to try." Darien squeezed her hand. "Any regrets?" "About marrying you? Several. About staying to fight? None." He laughed despite the circumstances. "I love you, Kaela Voss. I love you too, you stupid, reckless king." The Eastern Pact stopped just outside arrow range. A rider came forward carrying a white flag of parley. "They want to talk," Marcus said. "Then let's talk," Kaela replied. They met in the open ground between the armies. Kaela and Darien on one side, Lissa and the Eastern Alpha on the other. The Eastern Alpha was a grizzled wolf named Torvin, ancient and scarred, who'd ruled his territory for 30 years. "Last chance," Torvin said without preamble. "Surrender the throne. Exile the abomination. We'll allow Darien to live in peace somewhere far from here." "No," Darien said simply. "Then you die today. Your kingdom falls. Your people become ours." "Maybe," Kaela said. "Or maybe you all die trying to take it." Lissa spoke for the first time, her voice sharp with hatred. "You stole my brother, twisted him with whatever dark magic makes you what you are.
I'm going to enjoy watching you burn." "I didn't steal anything," Kaela replied. "He chose me. That's what really bothers you, isn't it? That he chose the broken wolf over his own sister." Lissa's hand went to her sword. "You want to settle this right now?" Kaela asked. "Just you and me? Winner takes the kingdom?" "Kaela," Darian started. "Yes," Lysa interrupted, her eyes gleaming. "Single combat. To the death. The winner's side gets everything." "Agreed," Kaela said before Darian could object. Torvin looked skeptical. "You think I'll honor that? If you win, my entire army just leaves?" "If I win," Kaela said, "your army will be too terrified to do anything else, because they'll have seen what I really am." They formed a circle, both armies pulling back to give space, creating an arena roughly 50 yards across. Kaela and Lysa stood at opposite ends. "Don't die," Sarah called out from the walls. "Wasn't planning on it," Kaela called back. Lysa drew her sword. "No weapons for you. How noble." "Don't need them," Kaela replied. Lysa attacked without warning, crossing the distance between them in seconds. Her sword aimed for Kayla's throat. Kaela shifted, but not into the beast form they'd all seen before, not the shadowy wolf creature that had terrified the northern reach, into something else entirely. Her body expanded, grew, changed in ways that defied biology and physics and everything anyone understood about wolves. Midnight black scales erupted across her skin, her spine elongated, vertebrae adding themselves impossibly. Wings, actual wings, membrane and bone and muscle, tore from her back. She became something that existed in legends and nightmares, but not in reality. Something ancient and primal and utterly terrifying. A dragon-wolf hybrid that should not exist. The armies on both sides stumbled backward in shock and fear. Lyssa's sword clattered from her nerveless fingers. Kayla's voice, when it came from this new form, was like thunder and grinding stone. "Still want to fight?" Lysa stood frozen, every instinct screaming at her to run. But she was an alpha's daughter. Pride wouldn't let her flee. "What are you?" she whispered. "I'm what happens when you throw away something precious and force it to evolve in the dark," Kaela replied. "I'm what you created." She moved faster than something that size should move, closing the distance in a single bound. One massive clawed hand, bigger than Lyssa's entire torso, slammed down, pinning the woman to the ground without crushing her. "You hate me because I'm different," Kaela said, her massive head lowering until they were eye to eye. "Because I break your rules. But I'm not here to destroy your world, Lysa. I'm here to save it from people like you who would rather watch it burn than see it change." She lifted her claw, releasing Lysa. "Run," she said simply. "Take your armies and run, or stay and die. Your choice." Lysa scrambled backward, terror written across her face. Then she ran. Torvin's army broke. Soldiers fleeing in every direction, their discipline shattered by the sight of something that shouldn't exist. The Eastern Alpha himself stood paralyzed, watching his careful plans crumble. Kaela shifted back to human form, standing naked in the middle of the battlefield. "Anyone else want to contest my right to be queen?" she called out to the fleeing army. No one answered. They were too busy running. Darian walked across the battlefield and wrapped his cloak around her shoulders. "That was new." "I know. Didn't know I could do that until about 30 seconds ago." "You're full of surprises. Is that a problem?" "No," he said, pulling her close. "It's perfect." The reconstruction took months. The Northern Reach had been damaged by the coup attempt and the near war. Trust needed rebuilding. Alliances needed forging. A new council needed forming. Kaela did it all with a ruthless efficiency that surprised even her. She released Vera from the cells with a pardon, but removed her from the council. The old woman accepted with bitter grace, retiring to a small cottage on the kingdom's edge. She reformed the palace guard, removing those who couldn't accept her and promoting those who could. She opened negotiations with the Southern Coalition, offering trade agreements and mutual defense pacts. She established new laws protecting those like her, those who didn't fit neatly into pack hierarchies, gave them places and purposes. And slowly, grudgingly, the kingdom began to accept her. Not everyone. There were still those who saw her as a monster who would never accept someone like her on the throne. But enough people did that it mattered. 6 months after the wedding, Kaela stood in the throne room with Sarah beside her. The girl,
now 15, was taller, stronger, more confident, no longer the terrified child who'd stumbled into Kaela's cave. "I want you to train the new guard," Kaela said. Sarah's eyes widened. "Me?" "You. You know what it's like to be weak and become strong, to survive when everyone expects you to die. That's what I want our soldiers to learn, not just how to fight, but how to endure." "What if they don't respect me? You're the girl who survived alone in the frontier, who killed rogues in the mountains, who stared down an entire army and didn't flinch." Kaela put her hands on Sarah's shoulders. "You're stronger than you think. Time to start believing it." Sarah nodded slowly, then smiled. "Yes, Your Majesty." "Don't call me that when it's just us. I'm still just Kaela." "No," Sarah said softly. "You're not. You're the queen who came back from exile, who turned her pain into power, who proved that being different doesn't mean being broken." Kaela felt tears sting her eyes, but blinked them back. That night, she stood with Darian on the same balcony where they'd talked before the wedding. "How does it feel?" he asked. 6 months as queen. Was it what you expected?" "Nothing about this was what I expected," Kaela admitted. "I thought exile would kill me. Thought rejection would break me. Thought I'd spend my life hiding what I was. But I'm still here, still standing, still fighting." She leaned against him. "You asked me once what I was. I think I finally know the answer." "What's that?" "I'm someone who refused to stay broken, who took every terrible thing that happened and used it to become stronger. Not perfect, not undamaged, but stronger." She paused. "I'm a survivor who became a queen. And maybe that's exactly what this kingdom needs." Darian kissed the top of her head. "It's definitely what I need." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. And Kaela thought about everything she'd lost and everything she'd gained, the pack that threw her away, the mate who broke her heart then fought to earn it back, the girl who became her daughter and everything but blood, the kingdom that needed a monster and got a queen instead. Years later, when historians wrote about this time, they would call it the era of the Dragon Queen. They would speak of Kaela Voss as a legend, a myth, a story too impossible to be entirely true. But Sarah, who lived to be old and told the story to her own children, always insisted it was real. "She was real," Sarah would say, "as real as the scars on my hands and the strength in my heart. She taught me that being broken isn't the same as being defeated, that the world will try to destroy you for being different, but you don't have to let it." Was she truly a dragon? The children would ask, eyes wide. "She was whatever she needed to be," Sarah would reply. "Monster when monsters were needed, queen when queens were needed, friend when friends were needed. That's what made her extraordinary. Not what she was, but who she chose to become." And in the palace, in a room no one else was allowed to enter, Kaela kept a single reminder of where she came from. The iron chains they'd bound her with during the rejection. She never wore them, never touched them, but she kept them visible. Because forgetting where you came from was how you lost yourself. And Kaela Voss, formerly Kaela Thorn, the broken wolf, the exile, the monster, had no intention of ever losing herself again. She'd clawed her way from nothing to queen, had turned rejection into power, had transformed pain into purpose. And if there was a lesson in her story, it was this: the world will tell you what you are, will try to put you in boxes and categories and chains, but you get to decide what you become. And sometimes the thing they throw away becomes the thing they need most. Sometimes the broken wolf becomes the queen. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly how the story is supposed to end. On a winter night 20 years later, when Sarah brought her own daughter to meet the aging queen, Kaela looked at the girl and saw herself at that age. Scared, uncertain, trying to figure out where she fit. "What do I do?" the girl asked. "Everyone says I'm too small to be a good fighter, too quiet to be a leader." Kaela smiled and took the girl's hand. "You know what you do?" she said. "You prove them wrong. Every single day, you wake up and prove them wrong. Not because you have to, but because you choose to. Because the most powerful thing in this world isn't strength or speed or even magic. What is it? Refusing to be what they say you are. Refusing to accept their limits. Refusing to break when they expect you to shatter." She squeezed the girl's hand. You're not too small or too quiet. You're exactly what you need to be. And anyone who says otherwise, they're just afraid of what you might become. The girl looked up at her with something like wonder. Is that what you did? Every day of my life, Kaela said. And look where it got me. She gestured at the kingdom spread below them, at the peace they'd built, at the future they'd created, at everything they said she'd never have. Remember this, Kaela said. When they throw you away, when they call you broken, when they say you're not enough, remember that I was all of those things too. And I became queen anyway. How? Kaela smiled. By refusing to die. And by learning that the things that make you different aren't weaknesses, they're weapons. If you know how to use them. The girl nodded slowly, understanding blooming in her eyes. And Kaela thought, good. One more person who knows. One more person who won't accept being broken. One more person who might become extraordinary because that was her real legacy. Not the throne or the crown or the battles won, but the knowledge that being broken was just the beginning, that transformation was possible, that the world would try to destroy you for being different, but you didn't have to let it. That sometimes, if you were brave enough, strong enough, stubborn enough, the rejected became the ruler, the exile became the queen, and the monster became the hero. That was Kaela's story, and it was a good one.